Upon arriving at my in-laws' residence, my husband and I were greeted warmly by my mother-in-law's smile. However, as I attempted to step inside, she halted me with a stern glare, asserting, "You're not needed here," before swiftly shutting the door. I stood bewildered, momentarily frozen by her unexpected rejection. When I cautiously reopened the door, her expression was one of seething anger. "I've heard the rumors. Your parents' financial troubles, aren't they? We don't want that kind of baggage here," she spat out before slamming the door once more. I stood outside, dumbfounded, clutching my bags. Through the closed door, the sounds of laughter between my husband and his mother echoed, leaving me feeling utterly abandoned. Realizing I deserved better treatment, I made the swift decision to depart, leaving behind the toxic atmosphere of my in-laws' home. I'm Nancy, a 32-year-old physician at the hospital established by my parents. It was there that I first encountered John, my now husband, when he was admitted following an injury. His charm, amiability, and engaging conversation quickly captured my attention. Despite being 5 years my junior, John exuded a sense of maturity and reliability that drew me in. After a year of courtship, we tied the knot. Meanwhile, John holds the position of vice president in his father's company, a role he carries out with diligence and skill. Interestingly, John's mother also holds a position within his father's company, adding a familial connection to their professional lives. When John and I announced our marriage, both of his parents expressed immense joy and excitement at the union. "Your parents built a renowned hospital, and now one of their own is marrying into our family as a doctor. It feels like a dream come true. We're truly delighted to welcome you, Nancy," my mother-in-law used to remark fondly. Every holiday season, including Christmas and other extended breaks, we made the customary trip to my in-laws' abode, where we were always received with open arms. I'd bring along delectable treats and beverages, serving as gifts for their New Year's festivities. My mother-in-law would orchestrate the cooking, graciously declining my offers of assistance. "Nancy, you toil tirelessly as a doctor. Just relax and enjoy your time here. Your family, there's no need for you to lift a finger," my husband would reassure me. Anticipation always tinged these visits with excitement, but today felt peculiar, particularly in my mother-in-law's demeanor. Her once warm gaze now bore into me with an icy chill, akin to that of a vampire. It marked the first instance of such frostiness from them. Debt? Such a concept had never crossed my mind in my parents' household. I have a younger brother, a fellow doctor, who works alongside me at our family's hospital. While my father had recently broached the topic of his health in a discussion with me, there had been no mention of any financial woes. As I drove home, a conversation from a week ago with my husband replayed in my mind. Despite our demanding careers, we coincidentally arrived home together that day. "I heard from my dad. He's considering retirement from surgery due to his declining eyesight. They decided to close the hospital," I informed him. My husband's reaction was one of disbelief. "The hospital shutting down? Could it be due to debts or something?" he questioned, visibly startled. "I'm not certain about debts, but they're discussing selling the hospital property. So, it looks like you won't be continuing your work there, and I might take a break for a while," I explained, before an emergency call from the hospital abruptly interrupted our conversation. "We'll have to pick this up later," I hastily added, realizing there was little time to spare. Later on, my husband justified his prolonged absences by citing work commitments, leaving us with skit opportunities to connect due to my night shifts. I suspected he may have embellished our conversation, perhaps implying to his parents that my family's hospital closure was linked to financial troubles and my involvement in resolving them. However, the frigid reception from my mother-in-law remained unfathomable. Lost in contemplation, I was en route home when a ringing phone from my bag jolted me from my reverie. Locked out by my mother-in-law, I had inadvertently driven off with my husband's belongings still in the car. His incessantly ringing phone piqued my concern. Though I had never entertained the idea of snooping before, the urgency of the situation nudged me to glance at the screen. Stopping the car, I retrieved his phone and attempted to unlock it, speculating that my husband's aversion to complexity would render the password simple. As anticipated, it yielded to his birth date. The caller, identified as Susan, was unfamiliar to me. Curiosity getting the better of me, I sifted through the message history, and what I discovered was nothing short of startling. "I want to see you soon. I wish I could be with Susan forever. I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays. I'll miss you. Once I get the money, I plan to leave her." Really? That makes me happy. I love Susan the most. These were the damning messages I found on my husband's phone, betraying his infidelity. My perception of him, along with my in-laws, crumbled in an instant. With no one else to confide in, I couldn't shake off the weight of the evidence I had discovered. Driven by a need for further confirmation, I ventured into my husband's study in search of more incriminating evidence. Rifling through his belongings, I stumbled upon a drawer containing photographs of him with an unfamiliar woman, presumably taken during a trip, alongside hotel receipts and other damning documents. Each revelation struck like a blow to my already shattered trust. Unable to bear the weight of this betrayal alone, I made the decision to seek solace at my parents' home. As I pressed the doorbell, it was my mother who greeted me, her surprise evident as she swung the door open. "Why are you here so late? You look pale. Are you okay?" My mother's concerned voice greeted me as tears welled in my eyes. Her caring presence was a balm to my distraught soul as she swiftly enveloped me in a warm blanket. Sensing my distress, my father's concern was palpable as he inquired about what had transpired. With trembling lips, I recounted the unsettling behavior of my in-laws. My mother's shock mirrored my own, while my father's anger simmered beneath the surface. "Such despicable, ungrateful behavior," he seethed. In a twist of fate, it emerged that my husband's family business was floundering, and they had frequently turned to my father for financial assistance, a fact previously unbeknownst to me. "Perhaps, for the sake of clarity, you should continue to observe their actions and discern their true intentions," my father suggested, his proposal laden with intrigue. At that moment, the idea held a peculiar allure. The following day, I mustered the courage to return to my in-laws' residence. Standing at the entrance, I raised my voice. "I apologize for my immaturity as a wife. Please allow me back in." Along with my apology, I presented an array of gourmet ingredients and fine wine as peace offerings. Eventually granted entry, I was met with a smug expression from my mother-in-law as she observed the luxurious gifts. Behind her, both my father-in-law and husband greeted me with icy stares. "We extended kindness to you under the assumption of your prestigious familial background. However, now that we're aware of your family's financial struggles, you'll need to exert yourself as a diligent wife," my mother-in-law declared, her words laced with disdain. Acknowledging the situation, I braced myself for the relentless mistreatment that followed. "Come on, get moving. Start cooking," she commanded, pushing me towards the kitchen. With the ingredients I had brought, I diligently prepared dishes and served them to my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband, who eagerly dug in. "Hey, we need more wine. Hurry up and fetch another bottle. You're so careless. Is this all you've prepared? You might be a skilled doctor, but you're utterly incompetent as a homemaker," they grumbled, yet devoured every last bite. As I attempted to join them for a meal, my mother-in-law abruptly slapped my hand, causing my fork to clatter to the floor. "What do you think you're doing, sitting here? Do you expect to dine with us? Housemaids eat in the kitchen. So now I'm just a housekeeper," I retorted incredulously, my voice trembling with disbelief. "How dare you speak to me like this, John? Especially when your family's fortunes have dwindled. Is that how you truly feel? And you, Nancy, with your arrogant demeanor. I've always despised it, but I tolerated it under the illusion of your family's wealth. Listen to your mother. I'll keep you around as nothing more than a housekeeper." John's words cut through me like a knife, shattering any lingering hope that his behavior was merely a facade. Realization dawned upon me. My husband's callous behavior was his true nature all along. Left alone in the cold kitchen, I resigned myself to eating the leftover scraps and facing a mountain of dirty dishes. "Save water and wash in cold," they instructed, a cruel directive that felt particularly harsh in the biting winter cold, causing my entire body to tremble uncontrollably. When night fell, my mother-in-law pointed towards a frigid shed devoid of any warmth or comfort. "Where's the bed?" I questioned, hoping for at least a semblance of decency. "What? You expect a bed?" she scoffed. "There are some old towels and cardboard in the shed. Make do," she replied callously, leaving me to confront the harsh reality of my situation. Recognizing their true colors, I discreetly recorded their abusive tirade. With nothing left to bind me to that toxic environment, I resolved to leave that house for good. That night, as I shivered in the freezing shed, my anger towards my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband served as my only source of warmth. "I'll never forgive them. I vowed, my determination burning brighter than the biting cold. In the dead of night, after they had succumbed to drunken stupor, I silently slipped away and drove back to the sanctuary of my parents' home. As I awoke to a new day and began packing my belongings, the door burst open, and my mother-in-law and husband barged in. Do you think you can simply abandon your duties without even preparing breakfast? How dare you leave your husband behind? Their accusatory glare sent a chill down my spine. It seemed my father-in-law was absent, but my husband and mother-in-law had no qualms about continuing their onslaught of disdain. I am finished with both of you, I declared, my voice trembling with resolve. How dare you speak back to your mother-in-law and husband? You were even more insufferable than I had imagined. If you wish for a divorce, so be it. But remember, if you initiate it, you will be the one paying compensation. Perhaps you can consider selling off the hospital's land. It should fetch a handsome sum. We'll take that, my father-in-law retorted coldly, his words dripping with malice. Though I had intended my words to be sarcastic, my husband merely smirked, believing he held the upper hand. To my dismay, he flung a paper in my direction. It was a pre-filled divorce application. If you refuse to comply with my demands, I will not hesitate to use this, he threatened, brandishing the document. Very well, this clarifies things for me, I replied calmly, though my heart was heavy with disappointment. What? Did you expect me to plead with you to stay, burdened with a hospital on the brink of bankruptcy and drowning in debt? I have no choice but to hold on to you, isn't that right? My husband's misconception of my intentions left me speechless. While it's true that my father retired and closed down the current hospital, we have plans to relocate to a new facility near the train station. Both my brother and I will continue our work there, with me serving as the director. Contrary to what you may have heard, we are far from being in debt. In fact, we possess more than enough assets to sustain us comfortably, I explained calmly, watching as my husband and mother-in-law's faces drained of color. This cannot be true. You deceived me, my husband stammered, his voice tinged with disbelief. I attempted to clarify, but you refused to listen and instead jumped to conclusions. So your family is still affluent, is it? Then what? My mother-in-law interjected anxiously, her panic evident. Can we just forget everything that transpired yesterday and today? After all, we've always been on good terms, haven't we? She pleaded, attempting to brush aside the events of the past few days. Her sudden change of heart struck me as laughable after enduring such insults. I'm astounded that you would spew such vile abuse at me and then have the audacity to ask me to forget it all. Remember, according to you, I'm just the housekeeper, right? I retorted, my tone laced with bitterness. No, it was all a misunderstanding. Please, let's just move past this, my husband pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. It's too late for apologies. I see through your facade now. By the way, my father will be reclaiming the $100,000 he loaned to your company, I retorted, my tone resolute. What? How did you find out about that? We don't have that kind of money, my husband exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice as he realized the magnitude of his error. Nancy, I apologize. I should have stood up for you against Mom. I promise to support you from now on, he implored, his words dripping with regret. You mean support Susan, right? I countered sharply, my patience wearing thin. How did you know about Susan? You were seeing her behind my back while pretending to work late. But I have all the evidence, I declared, displaying the incriminating photos and email exchanges on my phone. My husband's face paled as he stared at the damning evidence, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. You will be the one compensating me. Susan was just a meaningless fling I met at a bar. I'll end things with her. Please find it in your heart to forgive me, my husband pleaded, his apology accompanied by a pitiful demeanor. Tears and drool mingled on the floor, lending him an air of wretchedness. But that wasn't the end of it. I presented him with a photo of a life insurance policy taken out in my name and a detailed pamphlet on car maintenance, conspicuously highlighting a section regarding brake tampering. Not only did you covet my family's wealth, but you also plotted against my life. I've already informed the authorities, so your threats hold no sway over me anymore, I stated firmly, my resolve unwavering. My company is in dire straits. I need the money. Please, I beg you to help me, he pleaded desperately. Don't be absurd. From now on, all communication will be conducted through our lawyers. I never want to lay eyes on you again, I retorted coldly. As he lunged towards me, my father and brother emerged from the back room, swiftly restraining him. Pinned to the ground, he wept uncontrollably, while my mother-in-law stood by, rendered speechless by the unfolding spectacle. The house is registered under my name. I intend to sell it, so I'd appreciate it if you could vacate as soon as possible, I informed my husband and mother-in-law, who had always found excuses to prolong their stay. Eventually, my brother stepped in and firmly escorted them out. Following that, I initiated divorce proceedings. Both my husband and the woman he had been unfaithful with provided compensation. Despite his persistent pleas for reconciliation, I remained resolute. It was only when I threatened to involve the authorities that he ceased his attempts to reconcile. Through legal channels, I pursued repayment from my father-in-law's company, and the $100,000 loaned by my father was successfully retrieved. With my father-in-law's business already on shaky ground, it eventually succumbed to bankruptcy, burdened with substantial debts. Now, my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband reside in a modest, rundown apartment. Despite their efforts, juggling multiple part-time and day jobs, they struggle to stay afloat amidst their financial woes. Meanwhile, I have found fulfillment in my role as the director of a recently established hospital, thanks to the support of my brother. Together, we are committed to providing aid to those grappling with injuries and illnesses. I've invested in a comfortable apartment near the hospital and in relishing the independence of living life on my own terms.
The tech conference after party was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of expensive champagne and idle chatter. As I made my way through the crowd, glass of rosé in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My eyes scanned the room, searching for my husband, Rowan, who had drifted away moments earlier. That's when I saw them. Rowan, in a dimly lit corner, laughing intimately with a woman I didn't recognize. My heart stopped, and a tightness gripped my chest. I knew Rowan, and this wasn't normal. Steeling myself, I drew closer, straining to hear their hushed conversation. June, I can't wait for us to start our new life together. That house we looked at is perfect. Just wait until Lila finds out. Rowan's words sent a shockwave through me. A new house? With this woman? My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. Don't worry, darling. Once the money from your little embezzlement scheme clears, we'll be set. Lila will be none the wiser, June purred, her hand trailing along Rowan's arm. Embezzlement? My head spun as the pieces fell into place. Rowan, my loving husband, the father of my children, had been betraying me all this time. Rage and betrayal surged through me, threatening to consume me. I cleared my throat, causing them to jump in surprise. Rowan, June, what a pleasant surprise. Rowan's face drained of color as he stumbled to find the right words. Lila, this isn't what it looks like. Isn't it? I fired back, my voice dripping with venom. Because it looks like you're planning to run off with this woman, using money you stole from my company. June's eyes narrowed, a sly smile playing on her lips. Oh, Rowan, you didn't tell your dear wife about our little arrangement? Rowan shot June a pleading look, but she seemed to relish in his discomfort. Lila, please, let me explain. Explain what, Rowan? I cut him off, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. How you've been betraying me, our family, and everything I've built. No, I don't want to hear it. I turned on my heel, determined to put as much distance between myself and this train wreck as possible. But Rowan's hand shot out, grasping my arm. Lila, wait. Please, let's talk about this. I can fix this, I promise. I yanked my arm free, glaring at him with a fury I hadn't known I possessed. Fix it? How, Rowan? By running off with your mistress and my money? I scoffed, the words burning my tongue. No, I'm done. We're done. I want a divorce. With that, I stormed away, leaving Rowan and June in my wake, their shocked expressions searing into my memory. As I made my way out of the conference center, my vision blurred with tears of betrayal and rage. How could he do this to me, to our family? The drive home was a blur of my mind racing with 1,000 questions and 1,000 more answers I didn't want to confront. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had made up my mind. I was going to fight. I was going to take back everything Rowan had stolen from me, starting with my company and my life. The drive home from the tech conference felt like an eternity. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, a desperate need for answers. How could Rowan do this to me? To our family? The image of him with that woman, June, plotting to run off with my money, burned in my mind, searing into my very soul. As I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had to get a handle on this, to channel my fury into action. Lila Blackwood didn't back down, not from anyone, especially not her own husband. With a deep breath, I marched into the house, my footsteps echoing with determination. I found Rowan in the living room, pacing anxiously, his face a picture of guilt and panic. "Lila, thank God you're back. We need to talk about what you heard." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it, Rowan. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses." My voice was calm, but my eyes burned with barely contained rage. "I want the truth. Everything." Rowan's shoulders slumped, and he sank into the couch, running a hand through his hair. It started a few months ago. I got in over my head with some gambling debts, and I needed money fast. So I started skimming from your company accounts. Just a little at first, but then it spiraled out of control. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. And June, how does she fit into all this? June, she was someone I met at the casino. She saw an opportunity to get in on the money, and we started planning to run off together. I'm sorry, Lila. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sorry? I scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. You're sorry? Rowan, you've betrayed me, our family, and everything I've built. Do you have any idea what this could do to my company? Rowan's eyes widened in panic. Lila, please, you can't tell anyone. I'll pay it all back, I swear. Just give me some time. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. No, Rowan. You've had your chance and you blew it. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. Divorce? Lila, you can't be serious. Rowan surged to his feet, desperation etched in every line of his face. Think of the kids. Think of everything we've built together. I am thinking of the kids, Rowan, I replied, my voice cutting like ice. I'm thinking of the life you've stolen from them, the stability you've destroyed. And as for everything we've built, well, you've made it very clear that it means nothing to you. I turned to leave, pausing only to glare at him over my shoulder. This is your mess, Rowan. Clean it up, because if you don't, I will, and you won't like the consequences. With that, I strode out of the room, my mind already racing with 1,000 plans to untangle the web of deceit Rowan had woven. I would not go down without a fight. I would reclaim what was mine, no matter the cost. The moment I stepped into my office, a sense of purpose and determination washed over me. Rowan's betrayal had shattered my world, but I refused to let him win. This was my life, my company, and I would be damned if I let him destroy everything I'd built. I quickly called a meeting with the executive team, Marco, my trusted CFO, and Clara, my longtime mentor and closest confidante. As they gathered around the conference table, I could see the concern etched on their faces. Lila, what's going on? Marco asked, his brow furrowed. I heard the rumors about you and Rowan, but I wanted to hear it from you. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the difficult conversation ahead. Rowan has been embezzling money from the company. He's been using it to fund a gambling addiction and to set up a new life with his mistress. Clara's eyes widened in shock, while Marco's face darkened with fury. That bastard, he growled. How much has he taken? I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I need you both to help me get to the bottom of this. I want a full forensic audit of the company financials, and I want it done yesterday. Consider it done, Marco said, already pulling out his phone to assemble the team. And that's not all. I turned to Clara, my gaze unwavering. I need your help navigating the legal minefield. I'm filing for divorce, and I want to make sure Rowan pays for what he's done. Clara reached across the table, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. Of course, Lila. I'll put my best people on it. We'll make sure he doesn't get away with this. As the meeting adjourned, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. Rowan may have betrayed me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to take back control of my life, my company, and my future. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly with Marco and his team, digging deeper into the company's finances. The numbers were staggering. Rowan had siphoned off millions, all while living a lavish lifestyle with his mistress. The rage I felt only fueled my determination. Concurrently, Clara's legal team sprung into action, freezing Rowan's assets and preparing for a messy divorce battle. They uncovered even more of Rowan's deceit, including debts he had racked up in my name. It was infuriating, but I was grateful to have such a capable team fighting in my corner. As the legal proceedings began, Rowan grew increasingly desperate, lashing out with threats and attempts at manipulation, but I refused to back down. I had spent years building my company, my reputation, and my life. I wasn't about to let Rowan destroy it all. "You'll regret this, Lila," he snarled during one particularly heated exchange. "I'll make sure you and the kids lose everything." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't think so, Rowan. You're the one who's going to lose everything. Your money, your freedom, your family. This is my life, and I'm taking it back." With that, I turned and walked away, my steps filled with a newfound confidence. I had the support of my allies, the weight of the evidence on my side, and a burning desire for justice. Rowan may have thought he could outsmart me, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. You don't mess with Lila Blackwood. As the legal battle with Rowan raged on, I was grateful to have a strong support system in my corner. Marco, my loyal CFO and friend, had been instrumental in unraveling the financial web Rowan had woven. He worked tirelessly, poring over every transaction, every account, to piece together the full extent of the embezzlement. And then there was Clara, my trusted mentor and confidant. Her legal team was a force to be reckoned with, navigating the treacherous waters of the divorce proceedings with a skill that left Rowan's lawyers floundering. They uncovered even more of Rowan's deception, from hidden assets to fraudulent loans taken out in my name. "This is a mess, Lila," Clara said during one of our strategy sessions. "But we're going to make sure Rowan pays for what he's done. I promise you that." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and determination. "I know, Clara. I couldn't do this without you and Marco. You two have been my rocks through all of this." Clara reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "That's what family is for. We're in this together, Lila. All the way." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. With Clara and Marco by my side, I knew I could face anything Rowan threw at me. But Rowan, it seemed, was not one to go down without a fight. As the proceedings dragged on, his desperation became more and more apparent. He resorted to threats, trying to intimidate me into backing down. "You think you can just take everything from me?" he snarled during one particularly heated exchange. "I won't let you, Lila. I'll make sure you and the kids suffer for this." I held my ground, refusing to be cowed by his empty threats. "The only one who's going to suffer is you, Rowan. You brought this on yourself. Now you're going to face the consequences." Rowan's face contorted with rage, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I thought I knew, the man I had loved and trusted. But that man was long gone, replaced by a desperate, greedy individual who had betrayed everything we'd built together. As the legal proceedings continued, Rowan's behavior only grew more erratic. He lashed out at my allies, threatening Marco and even going so far as to confront Clara in her own office. "You're all a bunch of vultures, circling around to pick at the scraps of my life," he shouted, his face twisted with fury. "I won't let you take everything from me." Clara, ever the picture of composure, simply regarded him with a cool, steady gaze. "The only person taking anything from you, Rowan, is you. You've done this to yourself, and now you're going to pay the price." Rowan's shoulders slumped, the fight seeming to drain from him. But I knew better than to let my guard down. This was a man who had shown himself capable of the most despicable betrayals, and I couldn't afford to underestimate him. As I left Clara's office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Rowan was a wounded animal, and wounded animals were the most dangerous. I knew that the final showdown was still to come, and I had to be ready for anything. As the legal battle with Rowan dragged on, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. The constant threats, the whispers of his crimes, and the strain it was putting on my company and my family, it was becoming too much to bear. That's when I decided to go on the offensive. With the help of my trusted friend and PR maven, Samantha, I crafted a carefully orchestrated plan to expose Rowan's misdeeds to the world. "It's time to shift the narrative, Lila," Samantha said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let's take control of the story before Rowan can spin it to his advantage." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "I'm ready. Whatever it takes to bring him down and protect my company and my family." Over the next few weeks, Samantha worked tirelessly, using her extensive network of media contacts to plant the seeds of Rowan's downfall. She fed juicy tidbits to the tech press, hinting at the scandal brewing behind the scenes, the embezzlement, the gambling, the mistress. It didn't take long for the story to pick up steam. Soon, headlines were blaring, and the public was clamoring for more details. Rowan, who had once been a respected figure in the industry, found himself thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. When the sharks began to circle, Rowan grew increasingly desperate, lashing out at me and my allies, but we were ready for him. "You think this is going to save you, Lila?" He spat, his eyes wild with fury. "You've only made things worse. Now the whole world knows what a conniving bitch you are." I met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Rowan, the whole world knows what a despicable, greedy man you are, and they're going to watch as you pay for your sins." Rowan let out a humorless laugh. "You really think you can win this? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Oh, but I do," I replied, my voice dripping with contempt, "and that's why I'm going to make sure you never hurt me or my family ever again." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Rowan seething in his own impotent rage. I knew that the worst was yet to come, but I was prepared. I had the support of my allies, the weight of the evidence on my side, and a burning desire for justice. As the media storm raged on, I continued to work tirelessly with Samantha and my legal team to ensure that Rowan's misdeeds were exposed for all to see. We leveraged every connection, every resource at our disposal, until the truth became impossible to ignore. Rowan's gambling addiction, his lavish lifestyle funded by my company's money, his betrayal of our family, it all came pouring out, a torrent of revelations that left him reeling. I watched with a grim satisfaction as his social and professional standing crumbled, his once vaunted reputation reduced to ashes. And through it all I remained steadfast, my focus laser-sharp on the ultimate goal, reclaiming my life, my company, and my future. Rowan had taken so much from me, but I was determined to take it all back, and then some. As the final showdown in the courtroom loomed, I knew that the stakes had never been higher, but this time I was the one in control. This time, Rowan would answer for his crimes, and I would emerge victorious. The day of the final courtroom showdown had arrived, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of nervous anticipation coursing through my veins. After months of legal battles, of exposing Rowan's deceit and betrayal, this was the moment of reckoning. As I stepped into the imposing courtroom, my eyes immediately landed on Rowan, sitting hunched at the defendant's table, his once confident demeanor now tinged with desperation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenge ahead, and joined my own legal team, led by the formidable Vivian. "Are you ready for this, Lila?" Vivian asked, her gaze unwavering. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "More than ready. Let's make him pay for what he's done." The proceedings began with Vivian laying out the evidence, the meticulous paper trail of Rowan's embezzlement, the damning financial records, the testimony of those he'd wronged. With each passing moment, Rowan's face grew paler, the noose tightening around his neck. But just when I thought the case was all but won, Rowan's lawyer pulled a surprise witness, June, the woman he'd been planning to run off with. As June took the stand, her eyes darted around the courtroom, a mixture of fear and defiance etched on her face. I didn't know the full extent of Rowan's crimes," she stammered. "I only found out about the embezzlement and his gambling addiction after he dragged me into his scheme." Rowan's lawyer pounced, sensing an opportunity. "So you're telling us that my client kept you in the dark about his illegal activities?" June hesitated, her gaze flickering to where I sat. "Yes, that's right, Rowan. He lied to me, just like he lied to his wife. I had no idea what he was doing until it was too late." The courtroom erupted in a flurry of murmurs, and I felt a surge of triumph. Rowan's carefully crafted web of lies was unraveling before our eyes. Vivian wasted no time in seizing the advantage. "So, Miss June, are you telling this court that you were an unwitting accomplice in Mr. Blackwood's criminal activities?" June nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm sorry for what I've done. I never meant for any of this to happen." Rowan's face contorted with fury, and he leaped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "You backstabbing bitch!" he bellowed, his eyes wild with rage. "How dare you turn against me?" The judge slammed his gavel, his voice booming through the stunned silence. Order in the court. Mr. Blackwood, you will control yourself or be held in contempt. Rowan sank back into his seat, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment Rowan would finally face the consequences of his actions. As the final arguments were presented, I watched Rowan's world crumble around him. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies damning. There was no escape, no way for him to wriggle out of this. And when the verdict was read, sentencing Rowan to a lengthy prison term and stripping him of his assets, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice had been served, and I had emerged victorious. Rowan's betrayal had been laid bare for all to see, and now he would pay the price. As I left the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet triumph. I had won, but at what cost? The pain of Rowan's betrayal still stung, and the scars would take time to heal. But I knew that I was stronger for it, and that I was ready to start anew, to reclaim my life and my future. The verdict had come down, and Rowan's world crumbled around him. As he was led away in handcuffs, his face contorted with a mix of disbelief and rage, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. "This isn't over, Lila," he shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "I'll make you pay for this, I swear." I simply regarded him with a cool, steady gaze. "No, Rowan, this is over. You've lost everything, your freedom, your money, your family, and now you're going to pay the price for your betrayal." With that, he was whisked away, the heavy courtroom doors slamming shut behind him. I let out a deep breath, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally over. In the days and weeks that followed, the full extent of Rowan's downfall became painfully clear. His assets were seized, his reputation in tatters, and his once vaunted status in the tech community reduced to ashes. The media, once obsessed with his rise to power, now gleefully reported on his spectacular fall from grace. As for me, I emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. With the help of my loyal allies, I set about the task of rebuilding my life and my company. Marco, my trusted CFO, worked tirelessly to restore the financial stability that Rowan had threatened to destroy, while Clara's legal team ensured that I retained full custody of our children and a significant portion of our joint assets. "You've come out of this a warrior, Lila," Clara said, a proud smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Rowan thought he could break you, but you've proven him wrong. Now it's time to reclaim your life." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. That's exactly what I intend to do. I won't let Rowan's betrayal define me. This is my chance to start fresh, to build something even better. And that's exactly what I did. With a renewed sense of purpose, I poured my energy into my company, steering it to new heights of success. I used my experiences to create a foundation dedicated to supporting and empowering other women entrepreneurs, ensuring that they never had to face the kind of betrayal and adversity that I had endured. As for Rowan, his downfall was swift and unforgiving. Stripped of his wealth and social standing, he found himself adrift, a pariah in the very community he had once dominated. Attempts to rebuild his life were met with scorn and rejection, a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and resentment that still simmered within me. Rowan had taken so much from me, and even now, as he languished in the ruins of his once gilded life, I couldn't find it in myself to forgive him. "You brought this on yourself, Rowan," I said, when he reached out to me one final time, his voice laced with desperation. "And now you have to live with the consequences." With that, I severed all ties, determined to move forward and never look back. Rowan's betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had forged me into a stronger, more resilient woman, one who was ready to take on the world and win. As the dust settled on the tumultuous events that had upended my life, I found myself standing at the precipice of a new chapter. Rowan's betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it had also forged me into a stronger, more resilient woman. I was determined to take back control of my life and my future, and that's exactly what I set out to do. With Rowan's assets and embezzled funds returned to me, I was able to not only stabilize my company but propel it to new heights of success. The public's sympathy was firmly on my side, and I leveraged that goodwill to secure lucrative contracts and investments. My team, led by the ever-reliable Marco, worked tirelessly to streamline operations and capitalize on the newfound momentum. "It's like a weight has been lifted off our shoulders, Lila," Marco said during one of our strategy meetings. "Now that Rowan's mess is behind us, we can focus on taking this company to the next level." I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "That's exactly what I intend to do, Marco. This is our chance to build something truly remarkable." And that's exactly what we did. Over the following months, I poured my energy into not only rebuilding my company, but also creating a foundation to support other women entrepreneurs. The Lila Blackwood Foundation, as it came to be known, was a passion project that allowed me to channel my experiences into empowering others who faced similar challenges. "You're an inspiration, Lila," Clara, my trusted mentor, told me during the foundation's launch event. "The way you've risen from the ashes of Rowan's betrayal is a testament to your strength and resilience." I felt a swell of pride, but also a twinge of bittersweet emotion. "It wasn't easy, Clara. Rowan's actions nearly destroyed me, but I refused to let him win. This foundation is my way of ensuring that no other woman has to go through what I did." Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "And that's exactly why it's going to be a success. You've turned your pain into purpose, Lila. That's the mark of a true leader." As the foundation gained momentum, I found myself drawing strength from the women whose lives I was able to touch. Their stories of triumph over adversity, their determination to forge their own paths, it all served as a powerful reminder of why I had embarked on this journey in the first place. And then one day, as I was reviewing the Foundation's latest initiatives, I received an unexpected call. It was Rowan, his voice tinged with desperation. "Lila, please, you have to help me. I've lost everything, my money, my freedom, my reputation. I'm a pariah, and I have nothing left." I paused, my finger hovering over the end call button. A part of me wanted to simply hang up, to let Rowan wallow in the consequences of his own actions. But another part, a small, stubborn part, urged me to at least hear him out. "What do you want, Rowan?" I asked, my voice measured and calm. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the weight of his shame. I want to start over, Lila. I want to make amends, to try and rebuild my life. But I can't do it alone. Please, help me." I took a deep breath, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. After everything Rowan had put me through, could I really find it in myself to offer him a second chance? Could I, the woman he had betrayed so deeply, be the one to extend a lifeline? In the end, the decision wasn't as difficult as I had anticipated. "Rowan, I can't forgive you for what you've done. The damage you've caused is too great, and the trust you've broken can't be mended." I paused, steeling myself for what I was about to say next. "But if you're truly serious about starting over, about making amends, then I'll help you. On one condition. You have to be willing to work for it. Nothing will be handed to you this time." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then a faint, fragile voice came through the receiver. "Thank you, Lila. I won't let you down. I promise." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of emotions, a lingering resentment, a sliver of hope, and a profound sense of purpose. Rowan's road to redemption would be a long and arduous one, but if anyone could walk that path, it was him. And if he succeeded, perhaps there was a chance for true healing, for both of us. With a renewed sense of determination, I turned my attention back to the foundation, ready to forge ahead and continue making a difference in the lives of women everywhere. This was my new beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. The Austin Convention Center was a spectacle of glitz and glamour tonight for TechCon, the premier technology event of the year. I smoothed my deep burgundy cocktail dress as I waited for Derek to join me after mingling with investors. My husband had been actively pitching his new enterprise data security firm, CipherShield, to venture capitalists here. Across the crowded hall, I spotted Derek engaged in an intense discussion with Cassidy Wells, one of his employees. I knew Derek placed a lot of trust in the young software developer, but her body language seemed overly familiar. She stood entirely too close, practically whispering in his ear, with her fingers lingering on his forearm. A knot twisted in my stomach. Needing some air, I made my way through the crowd toward the open-air balcony. As I passed by them, Cassidy's words made me freeze in my tracks. "I hate having to sneak around like this," she murmured in a hushed tone. Derek glanced around furtively before responding in a low voice. "It's just until I can clean up this mess with Amelia." My heart pounded as his meaning washed over me in waves of disbelief and sickening realization. I stumbled outside, struggling to catch my breath. The cool night air provided little relief. "Hey, you okay?" A familiar voice broke through my daze. Vincent stood beside me, his thick-rimmed glasses illuminated by the glowing city skyline. "I think Derek is cheating on me." I managed to choke out the words, feeling them rip through my chest. Vince pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry. What happened?" Steadying myself, I recounted the exchange I'd overheard between Derek and Cassidy. Vince's face contorted with anger as the gravity of the situation sank in. "That bastard! After everything you've sacrificed to support his career?" His voice dripped with disdain. "We need to gather evidence and bring that slimeball down." I nodded, fists clenched with determination. Derek's deceit had shattered my world, but I refused to be a victim. If he thought I would go down without a fight, he was gravely mistaken. My mind raced as I formulated the first steps of my plan. "Vince, I need you to dig up whatever you can on Cassidy and any financial discrepancies at Cypher Shield. There's no way he could sustain an affair and keep that startup afloat legitimately." "Consider it done," Vince affirmed resolutely. "I've got contacts that can access all sorts of records. We'll make that lying sack of—" "Amelia?" Derek's voice cut through our hushed conversation. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." I spun around, anger flaring as I met the concerned gaze of the man I once trusted completely. Keeping my expression neutral, I willed myself to remain composed as deception after deception flashed through my mind. "Sorry, I just needed some air," I replied flatly. "Shall we head home? I'm feeling a bit under the weather." "Of course, baby." Derek gave my arm a reassuring squeeze as we said our goodbyes to Vince and made our way to the valet. The ride home was thick with leaden silence. I stared vacantly out the window, fear and fury churning within me. Tonight's unveiling had set in motion a series of events that would ultimately unravel Derek's web of lies. He had shattered the loving oath we had taken, violated the sanctity of our marriage. For that, he would face the consequences. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down upon him. And when it did, I would be ready to embrace my newfound freedom by letting the scales of justice solely in my favor. Over the following weeks, I kept a calculated distance from Derek, my affections turned to icy indifference. Meanwhile, Vince worked tirelessly to unearth any digital trail of Derek's misdeeds. I combed through months of credit card statements, Vince updated me one evening at his apartment. Lots of expensive dinners, hotel rooms, you name it, all the hallmarks of a tawdry affair. I clenched my jaw, sickened but unsurprised by the details of Derek's revolting dalliance with that cheap office slut. Vince's eyes narrowed. But that's not the worst of it. I found some major financial discrepancies at Cypher Shield, too. Like what? I leaned forward, my anger simmering. Well, for starters, it seems like Derek has been shunting investor money into unauthorized accounts under his control, Vince began, scrolling through documents on his laptop. There's also questionable accounting regarding payroll expenditures and taxes. That lying, cheating bastard, I erupted, fire coursing through me. He used my salary from Terrasis to help fund that startup scam. The sheer breadth of Derek's deception knew no bounds. While I poured my life into my software engineering role to make ends meet, he had been squandering our money on illicit thrills and shady dealings. Just then, the doorbell rang. Vince reflexively tensed before rising to answer it. I heard muffled voices before Derek's unmistakable timbre boomed from the entryway. "Where the hell is my wife?" I froze as he barged into the living room, incredulous fury etched across his face. "What kind of twisted games are you playing at?" He advanced on me, remorseless entitlement radiating from his towering frame. "You've been avoiding me for weeks and hanging around with this loser. Everything I've done is to provide for our future." In one charged motion, Derek swatted the laptop off the coffee table, sending it clattering to the floor. "We're going home right now." Something inside me snapped at his show of dominance. Years of suppressed anguish and rage detonated in an explosive torrent. "How dare you?" I shot daggers at my soon-to-be ex-husband. You've been cheating on me with that simpering whore Cassidy, blowing millions of dollars on your twisted fantasies while I worked myself to the bone. Derek's expression flashed from fury to fear as I unleashed the full, scorching brunt of my disgust. We're through, Derek. I refuse to be married to such a deceitful, morally bankrupt cretin. The days of your lies and betrayal are over. His jaw went slack as I punctuated the tirade by violently whipping off my wedding band, clattering it against the wall. Derek recoiled, any trace of smug control evaporating from his bullying facade. You're making a huge mistake, Amelia, he stammered, voice quivering. Nobody will believe your insane accusations. I'll bury you with my wealth and influence if you try to ruin me. I matched his glare with seething determination. I have no doubt your ludicrous spending and dodgy finances will bury you quite nicely without any help from me. With that, I stormed out, leaving a shell-shocked Derek gaping in the wake of his life's implosion. The first phase was complete. I'd irrevocably severed our ties and exposed his moral void, but this was merely the opening salvo. Derek's reckoning was long overdue, and I would be the catalyst to dismantle his life as he knew it, just as he had so brutally disassembled mine. In the days following my explosive confrontation with Derek, I felt an odd sense of calm amidst the swirling turmoil. I had shattered the facade of our sham marriage and reclaimed my dignity. Now it was time to pivot to the next phase, dismantling his life completely. Vince proved to be an invaluable ally, his ruthless efficiency in gathering intel matched only by his outrage at Derek's treachery. One evening, he arrived at my apartment looking grim. I have the nail for Derek's coffin, he stated, dropping a weighty manila folder on my kitchen counter. This is a logged record of every call, text, and email between him and his little mistress. I leafed through the documents, bile rising at the sheer volume of lurid communications. Explicit photos, arrived erotic messages, hotel reservations, all conclusive proof that Derek's affair had been raging for months under my oblivious nose. There's more, Vince continued grimly. It seems our dear husband wasn't quite as discreet in covering his financial tracks at Cipher Shield. He produced a raft of spreadsheets detailing transfers of investor funds to a shadowy shell corporation under Derek's control. The figures showed millions embezzled to furnish his depraved indulgences with Cassidy. That low-life scumbag, I erupted, anger detonating through me like an inferno. He jeopardized the entire startup to bankroll his fling? Vince nodded solemnly. Not just that. He flat-out lied to employees and investors about the company's financial standing to keep the grift going as long as possible. White-hot rage surged through my veins. I thought back to all the times Derek had manipulated and gaslit me about money issues, siphoning my hard-earned income to sustain his double life of unbridled deceit. That malignant, narcissistic predator? I seethed, trembling with revulsion. He robbed me of my dignity and self-worth for his selfish criminal pursuits. Just then, there was an insistent knock at the door. Vince and I exchanged puzzled glances before I moved to answer it. I pulled open the door to a cold draft, and the last person I expected to see. Derek, what the hell are you doing here? I hissed through gritted teeth. My wretched ex-husband barged past me into the apartment, his expression one of desperation and panic. We need to talk, he pleaded, eyes darting around wildly. This has gone too far, Amelia. You have to stop this crusade before it's too late. Too late for what? I arched an eyebrow, adrenaline coursing at his audacity to ambush me. Too late for you to escape the consequences of your craven betrayal and fraud? Derek ran his fingers through his disheveled hair, sweat beading on his forehead. Please, the evidence you've amassed, it could ruin me, destroy my entire life's work if it gets out. I allowed a bitter laugh to escape my lips. You mean the life's work of gaslit lying and cheating funded by other people's money? I'd say it's a ruination well-deserved, wouldn't you agree? Vince emerged from the kitchen, glaring daggers at the pathetic man before us. You've got a set of brass balls showing up here whimpering for mercy, he spat acidly, after you demolish this family's future without a second thought. To my satisfaction, Derek shrank back under the searing rebuke. The mask of his self-assured facade permanently shattered, leaving nothing but the craven coward who had irrevocably fractured my heart. I'll stop at nothing to make you atone for your trail of destruction. I stated coolly, fixing my treacherous ex-husband with an unflinching glare. Consider this the mere first flicker of the inferno I'm going to rain down upon your shattered, deceitful life. Derek's shoulders slumped in anguished defeat as the gravity of his impending ruination took hold. He opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. With leaden steps he turned and trudged out the door into the wintry night, alone, exposed, and bracing for the oncoming storm of searing justice I was determined to unleash. Mere days after Derek's pathetic attempt to grovel for mercy, I steeled myself to confront him again. But this time, on my terms. I strode into the Cipher Shield offices, head held high, despite the startled gazes of employees who recognized me. The sleek modern space seemed to reek of Derek's duplicity. I marched straight past the front desk toward his corner office. "Ma'am, you can't go back there," a flustered receptionist called after me, but I kept moving with determination. Flinging open his door, I fixed my soon-to-be ex-husband with a look of pure disgust. Derek was slumped at his desk, haggard shadows under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. "We need to talk. Now?" I stated flatly. Derek startled at my intrusion, quickly regaining his composure with an indignant scowl. "What are you doing here, causing a scene, Amelia?" "Don't play dumb," I shot back hotly. "We both know I have irrefutable proof of your reprehensible affair and shady dealings here." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a ceramic mug adorned with the face of that vapid bimbo Cassidy. My blood boiled at the audacity. "Using company funds to indulge your twisted fantasies with your little office whore?" I swept my arm across his desk, sending the mug and various files clattering to the floor in a cascade of papers and ceramic shards. "How dare you!" Derek erupted, leaping to his feet and pounding his fist on the desk. "This is my company, and I'll spend the money how I wish." "Your company?" I arched an eyebrow in contempt. "Or should I say, the company funded by investors and employees you've been ruthlessly duping for years to bankroll your pathetic infidelity." My words landed with sickening impact, Derek's feigned bravado crumbling. You have no proof," he stammered unconvincingly. Retrieving my phone, I pulled up the incriminating records Vince had gathered, the financial transfers, emails, travel logs of his rendezvous with Cassidy. I watched as each new dagger of evidence burrowed into Derek's facade. "Sure looks like proof of fraud and misappropriation to me," I stated coolly, holding the screen up for him to see the mountain of evidence. "I have more than enough to bury you unless you confess and resign immediately." Derek's chest heaved with impotent rage, knowing he was hopelessly cornered. Running his hands through his disheveled hair, panic crept across his features. You crazy bitch," he sputtered, spittle flying from his unhinged jaw. "Think anyone will believe your melodramatic hysterics over my reputation?" I fixed him with a look of pure, undisguised loathing. "The evidence speaks for itself, you immoral, gaslighting sociopath. I've played more than enough of your demented mind games." With a few taps, I sent the entire file repository to the Cipher Shield executive team and board of directors. Derek's phone instantly lit up with a flurry of alerts as his world began crashing down. "No," he croaked in disbelief, helplessly watching the reckoning unfold. "There's no escaping the truth this time," I stated with finality. "Nor the consequences of your compulsive lying and deception." In that moment, it became undeniably clear the facade had finally shattered. Gone was the smug narcissist, replaced by a sniveling, broken husk of a man. His chair squeaked as Derek collapsed back into it, seemingly deflating before my eyes. I turned on my heel and strode out, my disgust eclipsed by the grim satisfaction that justice had been decisively served. Still, deep down, I couldn't help feeling a lingering sense of gut-wrenching betrayal. The man I had loved, had built a life with, was nothing more than a mirage spun from greed and moral bankruptcy. But in the end, his greatest deception was the lie he had allowed me to believe, that the bind we once shared could ever be mended. For that, there would be no penance, no path to redemption. His downfall was complete and irrevocable, and I would emerge from the ashes, reborn and emboldened to forge a future free from the shackles of his depravity. In the aftermath of my explosive confrontation with Derek at Cipher Shield, the dominoes began to topple with ruthless momentum. Board members bombarded me with requests for details on the evidence against him, Investors screamed for answers about misappropriated funds. It was then that I knew I needed to bring in reinforcements. The situation had escalated beyond just exposing Derek's personal misdeeds. His entire empire was on the cusp of ruination. I turned to my loyal friend Sophia Larson, a brilliant corporate litigator I'd known since law school. If anyone could navigate the legal minefield ignited by Derek's malfeasance, it was her steely brilliance. "This is an absolute quagmire," Sophia muttered as she pored over the financial records and communication logs detailing Derek's affairs, both corporate and extramarital. She fixed me with an intense gaze. "Make no mistake, the evidence is damning. That snake husband of yours is looking at criminal fraud charges on multiple fronts along with termination." I nodded, adrenaline surging at the prospect of Derek facing maximum devastation for his transgressions. He deserves the book thrown at him. I want him to lose everything after how completely he betrayed me. "Oh, he will." Sophia's expression hardened. "We're going to systematically dismantle every shred of credibility and success he so arrogantly clung to. Facilitate a legal and PR bonfire that will incinerate Derek's reputation to ashes." Over the ensuing days, Sophia barraged Cypher Shield's board with a meticulous roadmap of Derek's deception and criminality. In tandem, she worked backdoor connections to funnel leaks about his indiscretions to media outlets. For his part, Derek remained outwardly defiant. He fought tooth and nail to shift blame and downplay the evidence. But legal proceedings were inexorably closing in, his corrupted legacy unraveling by the hour. I watched in perverse satisfaction as punishing headlines emblazoned Derek's face across publications: "Tech moguls fall from grace amid sex scandal," and "Cypher Shield CEO terminated, accused of fraud, embezzlement," became inescapable refrains. The evening the corporate axe officially fell, Vince and Sophia joined me at my apartment for a bottle of celebratory wine. We locked arms and cheered as footage of Derek being unceremoniously marched out of his offices by security flashed across the news. As the wine flowed, the catharsis truly sank in. My closest friends had stood resolute by my side in dismantling the once charmed life of my traitorous husband. We banded together, undaunted, to unleash the justice he deserved. "You did it, Em," Vince crowed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "The bastard got exactly what was coming to him." In those tender moments, a profound sense of renewal bloomed within me. The shackles of Derek's malfeasance no longer weighed me down. My tale of tragic betrayal had transmuted into one of triumphant rebirth, forged from the bonds of steadfast loyalty. I would never be a victim again. My friend's belief in me ignited a newfound inner fire, one that would blaze brightly, consuming any deceit that dared encroach upon the peace I had reclaimed. This was only the beginning. After the tsunami of humiliation Derek endured in the wake of his ouster from Cypher Shield, it felt cruelly fitting to deliver one final, crippling volley. A grand spectacle to raze any remaining remnants of his ruined reputation to the ground. Fate seemed to align when our city's annual Tech Hub conference rolled around a few weeks later. It was the perfect high-profile stage to showcase the true depths of his deceptions once and for all. Vince spearheaded the efforts, leveraging connections to ensure both Derek and his mistress Cassidy snapped up coveted invites. Salacious rumors had swirled in tech circles for weeks, so their presence ignited feverish anticipation. They took the bait, either oblivious to the firestorm brewing or too arrogantly defiant to heed the warning signs. On the night of the gala, I arrived through a discreet back entrance, carefully plotting my final ruinous gambit. Donning an elegant black gown, my appearance would be the calm before the storm. I took a fortifying breath as Vince and Sophia rendezvoused with me, sleek in their evening attire. "It's go time. You both remember the plan?" They nodded in grim acknowledgement, the gravity of this evening's events clear. This was about more than mere payback against Derek. It was about justice, irrefutable and blinding for all to bear witness. "Knock 'em dead, kiddo," Vince murmured with a reassuring squeeze of my arm. I slipped into the opulent grand ballroom, a hush falling over the crowd as I became visible. Derek stood near the stage, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with a petulant Cassidy. Even through his rumpled tuxedo, the weight of recent weeks had clearly exacted its toll. Striding to the center of the room, I felt hundreds of probing gazes scrutinizing my movements. Let them feast their eyes and minds for the reckoning to come. Tapping the microphone twice, I cleared my throat, the sound piercing through the tension like a thunderclap. "Excuse me, everyone. May I have your attention, please?" My voice rang with commanding authority, instantly silencing any lingering whispers. My name is Amelia Archer. Many of you are likely familiar with the sordid allegations surrounding my husband, the disgraced Derek Archer, and his criminal fraud along with infidelity involving the woman beside him, Cassidy Wells. An audible murmuring rippled through the ballroom as I gestured to the pair, paralyzed like deer in headlights under the ever-intensifying spotlight. "Well, those rumors are all true, and then some," I pronounced with finality, holding up a tablet displaying the reams of incriminating documentation. "This degenerate knowingly embezzled millions from Cipher Shield, a firm founded on the labor and investments of this entire community, for his own crooked interests." The tension hung thick as onlookers absorbed the extent of my words. But perhaps even more repulsively, he financed a protracted, despicable affair with his colleague Cassidy by diverting those misappropriated funds to luxury hotel gifts and other salacious trysts. Jaws agape. The crowd drank in every damning detail. I fixed Derek with a searing glare as he feebly tried to protest, his mouth opening and closing in futile dismay. "So let this sordid saga serve as a righteous reckoning against the moral failings of greed, infidelity, and exploitation," I proclaimed with conviction. "This towering monument to decadence must implode under the weight of its own iniquities." As if on cue, Sophia initiated the video sequence assembled from the annexed files. Lurid photo evidence, salacious email exchanges, and incriminating financial statements flashing across the giant ballroom screens for all to absorb in unvarnished detail. A guttural cry of mortification rang out as Cassidy collapsed to her knees, clawing and grasping at whatever dignity she could salvage. Derek stood stupefied, transfixed by the carnage of his sickening misdeeds materializing before him. You're unhinged," he managed to sputter incredulously, veins protruding in his flushed face. "Still spinning lies to shield your inflated ego from accepting the truth?" I coolly retorted, stepping forward to meet my wretched adversary eye to eye. "That pathological tendency was your ultimate downfall." Derek faltered under my unrelenting gaze, shaking his head in vain denial. "Face it, Derek, you are a shattered, morally bankrupt disgrace of a human being, a vermin who exploited the trust and resources of everyone around you to satisfy your grotesque vices. You don't deserve a shred of redemption or dignity." He opened his mouth once more, a final merciful protestation no doubt waiting on his lips, but I'd allowed his poison more oxygen than it deserved already. "Your debt to society has finally come due," I stated with finality. "This is justice. Ugly, furious, yet utterly warranted justice. May its searing conviction blacken your name into irreversible infamy." With that, I turned on my heel and marched away, leaving Derek to wallow in the smoldering ruins of the life he had so ruthlessly disgraced through deception and indulgence, karma's reckoning complete. In the aftermath of my explosive unveiling at the Tech Hub Gala, Derek's life detonated in spectacular fashion. No sphere was left unscathed as the towering inferno of his sins raged. Within days, Cipher Shield's remaining investors launched a blistering lawsuit, citing racketeering, fraud, and embezzlement charges that could bankrupt Derek for decades. Corporate sponsors began falling like dominoes. Termination letters flooded in as news of his depraved conduct with Cassidy circulated. Any upstanding firm couldn't risk the stain of association. Several media outlets, salivating over the salacious scandal, unearthed further incriminating details. Testimonies from relatives and former employees painted a disturbing portrait of clinical narcissism and serial infidelities that called Derek's entire professional career into question. For my part, I opted out of the media circus, letting the uncontestable evidence dismantle his legacy of deceit. I spent evenings with Vince and Sophia, sharing bottles of bold Cabernet in solemn celebration of justice served. "I still can't believe we pulled that off at the gala." Vince grinned one night, clinking his wine glass against mine. "Did you see Derek's face when the videos started rolling? He looked like he'd been gut-punched by a freight train." "And that sniveling shrew Cassidy," Sophia chimed in with a derisive scoff. Served her right for betraying her entire gender to cozy up to that creep's ill-gotten riches. We shared a cathartic laugh at their expense. After the maelstrom of deception and pain, seeing the catalysts of betrayal suffer their just deserts was perversely uplifting. I had confronted the harsh realities of evil, emerged vindicated. However, the sweet, lingering reverberations of victory curdled one fateful evening a few weeks later. A familiar name flashed across my phone screen, Derek. I froze, my chest tightening with disbelieving dread. Part of me thought he'd slink permanently into exile after the humiliation. But of course, malignant denial seemed to course through his veins. I let the call go to voicemail as his desperate ramblings crackled from the speaker. Something about not being able to access accounts or funds, needing one last conversation to explain his side. I shook my head grimly, the audacity of his pleas stoking anger through my veins. How pathetically typical of him to beg for scraps after such scorched earth destruction. When another insistent call came through, I answered with fury blazing. What could you possibly want after everything you've put me through? Your staggering greed and depravity were enough to incinerate your entire life to ashes. I'm utterly ruined. Derek's voice trembled, a husk of his once arrogantly boastful tenor. The lawsuits, the investigations, I can't escape any of it. And whose moral bankruptcy dealt that fatal wound? I countered acidly, reveling in dismantling the remnants of his fragile ego. Did you think there would be no dire consequences for betraying me in such a horrific, protracted manner, for pillaging everyone around you to indulge your deviant appetites? I'm penniless, Amelia, Derek continued, a hollow plea creeping into his voice. I have nowhere to turn. Just give me a chance to explain. Please. Save your sniveling excuses, I seethed with finality. Any man possessing even an iota of a soul would not relentlessly trample on the sanctity of marriage and those he claimed to cherish. There was a pregnant pause as Derek registered the futility of redemption. You've made your wretched bed, I pronounced with conviction. Now lie in it and ruminate on the consequences of your corrosive greed and ego until your dying day. With that, I terminated the call, severing any lingering embers of remorse for my husband's self-immolated downfall. He was now an ashen husk in my mind, effectively excised from existence. It was over. Justice had been rendered in all its blistering glory. In the serene 2 years following my campaign of scorched earth defiance against Derek, I found unexpected solace in rebirth. Gone are the shackles of betrayal and emotional tumult, forsaken along with our sham marital vows the instant his trail of deceit unraveled. In their place now shines a renewed inner radiance, forged from the bonds of friendship that guided me through my bleakest suffering. When the smoke finally cleared and Derek's raging inferno of misdeeds smoldered to cinders, I turned inward. With Vince and Sophia's counsel, I devoted myself to intensive therapy, healing the deep scars inflicted by my depraved husband's utter lack of morality or remorse. For a time, deflecting bitter thoughts about the devastation he wrought proved agonizing. When waves of anger and trauma roiled, I medicated, seeking stillness through exercise, meditation, immersing myself in nature's soothing expanses. Slowly but surely, I rediscovered the fire of my own indomitable spirit that shattered Derek's web of lies. Days faded into months, then years. I savored each incremental reawakening of my confidence, passion, and purpose, unshackled from his lurid exploits and treachery. My stalwart career as a software engineer remained a bedrock through it all. I excelled on ambitious projects, mentored bright junior engineers, and fiercely protected my team's talent from toxic cultures of dishonest leaders. In turn, terraces shower me with new opportunities, raises, leadership roles, finally culminating in a director position managing cutting-edge cryptography initiatives. I redoubled my pursuits of creative stimulation as well. I relished adventures with Vince and Sophia, exotic vacations, theatrical shows, and other indulgences that awakened a renewed lust for experiencing the richness of life. On one such trip, hiking through the lush rainforests of Costa Rica, I found myself marveling at our resilient friendship. When embers of doubt crept into my psyche in those first turbulent months post-Derek, their belief in my brighter destiny never wavered. You know, it was your unwavering moral compass that ultimately saved all of us from falling prey to that snake. Vince reflected wistfully as we traversed the verdant jungle paths. If you hadn't been willing to go scorched earth, who knows how much more damage he could have inflicted. I contemplated those words, embracing their profound resonance. By exposing Derek's lecherous criminality, I hadn't merely claimed vengeance. I had redirected my life path away from that corrosive spiral of deception. That chapter of suffering while anguishing had transmuted into catalyzing events that forged me into a stronger, more self-assured woman. No longer would I meekly accept exploitation or cruelty at the hands of anyone, colleagues or lovers. I embraced uncompromising defiance as a protective reflex, a shield hardened by the purifying fires I'd stared down and conquered. Now, each new dawn delivering novel challenges and adventures exhilarates me with fresh possibility. What heights can I scale if tempered by the lessons of betrayal's harsh tutelage? What bonds might I cultivate, untainted by doubts that strengthen my tenacity and uplift others from despair? These are the unanswered wonders beckoning me into the bright horizons shimmering ahead. A panorama free from the toxic specter of derailed dreams and despoiled trust that I once lamented under Derek. Now, only wispy embers of my former life still smolder, no longer possessing the vitality to sear me with anguish. They have dissipated to half-remembered phantoms, devoured by the radiant rising of my triumphant, remade identity. My name is Amelia. I am a survivor, rededicated to abundance and grace, and my journey soars ever onward without limitation. I won the lottery, and I'm leaving you, Lila. It's time I found someone who truly believes in me. The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog as Derek stared me down across the living room. My heart pounded, threatening to burst from my chest. This had to be some sick joke. "What are you saying?" I stammered, glancing at my sister Nora and Derek's friend Alex, who wore equally dumbfounded expressions. Derek's lips curved into a self-satisfied smirk as he produced a lottery ticket from his pocket and waved it in front of my face. "Feast your eyes on our golden ticket to freedom, my dear." My legs felt like jelly as the gravity of his announcement hit me. You won the lottery? And you're leaving me?" "That's right," he nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I'm finally getting out from under your doubting shadow and living like I deserve with someone who supports my dreams." The cruel insinuation of his words stung like acid. Was this truly the man I married 5 years ago? The one who once showered me with affection and appreciation? "Derek, I've always supported you," I cried out, desperate for him to see reason. "Your inventions, your business ideas, I believed in you every step of the way." He let out a mocking laugh. "You expect me to believe that? I saw the skepticism in your eyes whenever I pitched a new concept, the way you'd grit your teeth and nod along, just indulging my silly fantasies." My mouth hung open, a retort dying on my lips as my mind raced for a counter-argument. How could I convince him of something he was so resolutely convinced wasn't true? "You're delusional." Nora's shrill voice pierced the tension, her eyes blazing as she stepped forward. "Lila has been nothing but a supportive, loving wife to your sorry ass." "Stay out of this," Derek snarled at her, whipping his gaze back to me. "I'm doing us both a favor and sparing you the agony of waiting for me to succeed. With this lottery jackpot, I can finally surround myself with people who genuinely want to see me soar." As his vicious words swirled around me, stealing the breath from my lungs, the true depth of his betrayal became painstakingly clear. He wasn't just leaving me, he was leaving me for someone else. Someone he claimed appreciated his ambitions in a way I apparently hadn't. I opened my mouth to speak, to hurl back the venom he'd spewed at me, but Nora beat me to it. "You low-life scumbag," she shouted, lunging forward as if to attack, before Alex swiftly wrapped his arms around her, restraining her flailing limbs. "Don't you dare stand there and act like you're doing Lila a favor. You're just a selfish snake looking to trade her in for some young, naive thing who worships your ego." Derek's eyes widened momentarily at her outburst, before narrowing again in derision. "You'll see," he muttered darkly. "You'll all see." With that parting shot, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the front door behind him with a resounding thud that shook the walls. In the ensuing silence, I sank shakily onto the couch, the lottery ticket still clutched in my trembling hands. The stark numbers seemed to taunt me. A prize beyond my wildest dreams that should have been a joyous blessing, now marred by the harsh reality of the husband who had won it. This was my life now. My marriage in shambles, my heart in pieces. All because Derek had come into an obscene amount of money and allowed it to warp his perception of everything we once had. As tears streamed down my cheeks, I felt Nora's arms encircle me from behind, her quiet sobs mingling with mine. Beside us, Alex stared off into the distance, his expression haunted by the ugly scene he'd just witnessed. This was the hand I'd been dealt. But no amount of wealth was worth sacrificing my dignity, my self-worth. Derek's cruel rejection would not be my undoing. It would be the spark that ignited an unquenchable fire of vengeance within me. He wanted to see someone who truly believed in him? I'd make sure the whole world saw Derek Jefferson for the delusional, egomaniacal traitor he really was. The next few days passed in a blur of anger, heartache, and disbelief. Derek's words continued to echo in my mind, that outrageous claim of me not believing in his dreams. The more I relived that terrible night, the more convinced I became that his insane justification for leaving hid an even uglier truth. There has to be more to this, I told Nora one morning over coffee, my hands trembling as I clutched the ceramic mug. Derek has lost his mind if he truly believes the lies he's telling himself. Nora nodded grimly. That arrogant jackass is hiding something, I know it. She leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Have you tried calling him again? 12 times, I sighed. He's not answering. Of course not. He's too busy rolling around in his lottery millions with his new delusional worshipper by his side. My fists clenched involuntarily at her words. There's no way he's dumb enough to blow all that money catering to the whims of some vapid gold-digging hussy. Except the more I thought about it, the more it made twisted sense. My throat constricted as a horrid suspicion formed. Oh, God. What if that's his plan? What if he's already found a woman just as narcissistic as he is, who will happily live off his winnings while feeding his ego? You think he's got someone lined up already? Nora looked aghast. That's low, even for him. Jaw clenched. I dug out my phone and began scrolling through missed calls, finally hovering over the contact info for Alex, Derek's best friend from college. He always saw through Derek's bullshit. Maybe he had some insight. The line rang twice before Alex answered, his tone guarded. Lila, what's up? I need to know everything, I stated bluntly, taking a fortifying sip of coffee. Everything you know about what's really going on with Derek and his big lottery dreams. There was a heavy pause before Alex sighed heavily. To be honest, I'm not sure I want to get in the middle of this mess. White-hot anger flared within me, burning away my composure. Don't give me that crap, I snapped, my voice rising. Your idiot buddy just destroyed a 5-year marriage based on one insane, narcissistic delusion after another. You're damn right you need to get in the middle of it and tell me what you know. Another pause. Then, okay, you're right. I could picture Alex rubbing his temples as he continued in a low voice. A couple weeks ago, Derek was bragging to me about how he scored big with that lottery prize. He exhaled heavily. But he also mentioned some girl he'd been seeing behind your back, an influencer or something, way younger than him. What? I gasped, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut as the reality sank in. He's been cheating on me? Yeah, and from what I could gather, his big plan was to use the lottery money to wine and dine this chick into being his new guaranteed pay pig for life, all while making it seem like she's just this huge supporter of his entrepreneurial spirit or whatever. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor and splashing hot coffee across the tile. Derek's betrayal sliced through me deeper than any serrated blade ever could. Not only was he leaving me in the cruelest way imaginable, he was happily trading me in for the shallower pleasures of a materialistic, status-obsessed bimbo. As if sensing my inner turmoil, Alex continued in a wary tone. I tried warning him that what he was doing was beyond screwed up, but you know how Derek gets when his mind is made up on something crazy. I always thought his arrogance stemmed from some deep-seated insecurity, I said thickly, my throat burning with unshed tears. But this is a new low that I never imagined. Through the haze of shock and heartbreak, one thought began to take form. A terrible, irresistible desire to make Derek pay for the anguish he'd put me through, to show him the consequences of his betrayal, starting with the woman he meant to discard me for. I met Nora's gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between us. Get me everything you can on this so-called influencer, I stated, my voice hard. Every social media account, every fan page, anything to give me ammunition against the little harlot trying to steal my husband. Nora's lips curved into a vindictive smirk. Oh, I'll do better than that, sis. She whipped out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. By the time we're done, this attention-starved bimbo is going to wish she never laid eyes on Derek Jefferson's selfish ass. My own smile mirrored the icy promise of vengeance brewing within me. The delusion was over. Derek and his new prize were about to face the harsh sting of reality, and I would be the one delivering the painful wake-up call. That low-life scumbag! The words erupted from my lips like venom as I slammed my palms on the kitchen table, glaring at the picture of Derek grinning next to his vapid influencer fling. Alex shifted uncomfortably beside me, his expression pained. I know, Lila. Believe me, seeing him throw away your marriage for this bimbo makes me sick too. Well, we're going to make him regret it. My voice dripped with steely determination as I turned to face my unexpected ally. In the aftermath of Derek's bombshell betrayal, it was Alex who had stepped up as a steady source of support and inside information. While Nora busied herself uncovering every sordid detail about the social media starlet latching onto my ex like a parasite, Alex had filled me in on more of Derek's twisted motivations. Apparently, Derek's lottery delusion ran even deeper than I'd realized. He was convinced this cam model with a rapper bod, as Nora crudely dubbed her, was the only one who could appreciate his entrepreneurial spirit. The perfect accessory to flaunt his wealth and prop up his crumbling ego. We have to hit him where it hurts, take away the two things he cares about most, Alex stated grimly. His money and his inflated sense of self-importance. I nodded, my jaw setting. And thanks to you, I have the evidence to do just that concerning his lottery winnings. A twisted smile played across my lips as I retrieved the faded convenience store photo tucked in my pocket, an image of Alex, Derek, and I smiling and holding up our fateful lottery ticket from years ago, the very ticket Derek was now trying to claim full ownership over. Once the truth comes out about us being partners on this prize, his plans to bankroll a lavish lifestyle for himself and his new arm candy fling are going to hit one hell of a financial roadblock. Not to mention the PR nightmare it'll cause when the world realizes what an egotistical, manipulative dirtbag he really is. Nora strode into the room, fire blazing in her eyes as she slapped a thick manila folder on the table. Speaking of which, I've got enough dirt on the so-called influencer to make their heads spin. Sliding the folder toward me, she flipped it open to reveal a myriad of social media posts. Selfies of the heavily made-up, surgically enhanced blonde posing and pouting, her shrill captions overflowing with narcissistic hashtags and vapid catchphrases. Her real name is Belinda Stone, 24 years young and dumb as a brick. Nora's tone dripped with contempt, originally from a wealthy family who cut her off once she got too absorbed chasing internet fame and fortune to care about anything else. My stomach churned with revulsion as I absorbed the evidence of this woman's unabashed vanity, materialism, and willful ignorance. No wonder Derek was enamored. She was essentially a funhouse mirror version of himself. We have to take her down, along with that ego-bloated pig she's parading around with, I declared, steadying my nerves with a deep inhale. Expose every dirty secret, every con, every pathetic ploy for attention they're attempting to pull. Alex let out a low whistle as he scanned the damning information Nora had gathered. Starting to feel sorry for these two, the more I see how sadistic your revenge is going to be. A harsh laugh escaped my lips. Don't feel too sorry, they're the ones reaping what they sowed. Resting a hand on the folder, I met Alex's gaze, my eyes hardening. Once the world sees them for the shallow, manipulative frauds they are, Derek and his little harlot won't have an ounce of admiration or respect left to feed their delusional narcissism. A grim smile crossed Nora's face as she gave a resolute nod. Time to watch the shit hit the fan, sis. I mirrored her expression, feeling the familiar flames of rage mingle with a deep, vindictive satisfaction. Indeed it is. Derek wanted to see someone who truly believed in him? By the time I was through, the whole world would see just how unworthy he was of anyone's belief or devotion. The painful downfall of his sickening delusions would serve as the harshest slap of reality. and I wouldn't stop until his despicable arrogance was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. This better work. The hushed words slipped through clenched teeth as I stared at the screen, watching the final edits to the video Nora had meticulously crafted. My sister flashed me a reassuring smirk. "Relax, sis. This is like dangling bloody chum in front of a great white shark. Belinda will take the bait, hook, line, and sinker." I shuddered inwardly, still uneasy about deploying such underhanded tactics. But after learning the full extent of Derek's betrayal and Belinda's part in it, any moral compunctions I had were overshadowed by my thirst for vengeance. They needed to pay. To have their deceit and shallowness shoved back in their smug faces for the whole world to witness. Nodding resolutely, I clicked the upload button, and within seconds the video began spreading across the internet like a virus. A perfectly curated look at the affluent, glamorous life I was now supposedly leading post-divorce. Strategic shots highlighted a luxurious and tastefully decorated home, designer clothes and accessories draped across every surface, even a sleek new sports car parked in the driveway with a bright red bow planted on the hood. Of course, none of it was real. Just one big, elaborately staged deception made possible through Nora's media connections and an underground production team specializing in fabricating fake realities. That smug tramp won't know what hit her. Nora grinned viciously, scrolling through the slew of comments already pouring in from confused onlookers, speculating about my newfound wealth. "Holy crap, look at all the thirsty dudes already slobbering over those bikini shots," she let out a mocking laugh. "I almost feel bad for how badly we're going to break their desperate little hearts." Any glimmer of guilt I felt was extinguished as I stared at the still images showcasing my toned body draped in attention-grabbing swimwear around a glistening private pool. A far cry from the modest one-pieces I usually favored. Plastering on a saccharine smile and pouty expression took more effort than I cared to admit. But playing into the delusion, putting on a facade, was the only way to make this sting as painfully as it needed to for Belinda and Derek. Because that was their greatest downfall, letting ego and vanity blind them from appreciating what really mattered in life. Integrity, honor, mutual understanding and sacrifice in a relationship rather than selfish delusion. "Does this go too far?" I asked uncertainly, watching the spectacle spread further across various social platforms. "I mean, is there a line we're crossing into dangerous territory?" Alex's voice made me jump as he emerged from the kitchen, a mug of coffee in hand. "Nah, don't overthink it. You're just giving the soulless narcissists a taste of their own medicine." There was an edge of bitterness to his tone that surprised me, but I supposed seeing his oldest friend spiraling into egomaniacal delusion would breed resentment in anyone. "Soon as Belinda thinks you've become the richer, spiteful ex out for revenge against Derek through shameless flaunting, she'll come sniffing around to ingratiate herself." Alex shook his head in disgust. "Self-preservation is all that talentless leech cares about." "Exactly." Nora stabbed a finger at the screen, where several tabloid reports were already emerging about my mysterious new fortune. "She'll see this diamond-studded opportunity dangling in front of her shallow eyes and do whatever it takes to latch on." Glancing between my co-conspirators, I felt a swell of gratitude for their unwavering support and willingness to go to such depraved lengths in the name of karma and revenge. I couldn't have executed such an elaborate ruse alone. With a steadying breath, I straightened my shoulders and tightened my resolve. Whatever lines we had to cross in the coming days, it would all be worth it to pry Derek and Belinda out of their self-indulgent fantasies. Once their true, ugly natures were exposed under the harsh global spotlight, not even their ill-gotten lottery winnings could shield them from the crushing downfall that awaited. This charade would either make them face reality or completely unhinge them as their world of delusion came crumbling down. And I would be the merciless instigator, ensuring that total cathartic ruination occurred. The shrill ring of my phone shattered the tense silence that had settled over the room. Nora and I exchanged a loaded glance before I snatched it up, my heart pounding. "Hello? Lila? Oh my God, is it really you?" The sugary sweet voice on the other end made my skin crawl with revulsion. "It's Belinda." I had to resist the urge to hurl the phone across the room. Of course, the vapid leech was slithering her way back into my life, her greed overriding any sense of shame or decency. Fighting to keep my tone even, I replied, "Yes, it's me, Belinda. I take it you've seen the footage circulating about my new lifestyle?" "Girl, yes, it's absolutely incredible," she gushed in that gratingly vacuous way of hers. "I mean, those houses, those cars, those designer bikinis, you're living the dream." My lip curled involuntarily. If only this delusional bimbo knew the true extent of her mistakes in aligning herself with a man like Derek. But she would soon enough. "Well, I'll admit the past few months have been—" I paused, as if considering my words carefully. "Liberating. Shedding the dead weight from my life and stepping into my own self-made fortune has been euphoric, really." A heavy silence fell as Belinda absorbed the not-so-subtle dig at my ex-husband and her new money-grubbing beau. But her desperation for hollow status symbols eventually overpowered any reluctance. "You know, I always had a feeling you were too good for that loser," she cooed, her phony sweetness morphing into undisguised envy, especially now that he's squandering away those lottery millions on ridiculous pipe dreams that are doomed to fail. I inhaled sharply, equal parts disgusted and infuriated by her blatant attempt to drive a wedge between Derek and myself. As if basking in her ill-gotten gains wasn't enough, she had to try and twist the knife more. "Well, you're certainly free to think what you want about Derek's life choices," I replied coolly, catching Nora's gaze and giving an infinitesimal nod. She sprang into action immediately, keying up the prepared video files and patching through to the live feed I had routed to every major news network. "Although," I continued smoothly, staring dead ahead at the camera light now blinking, "I think the world deserves to hear your take on things from your own lying, opportunistic mouth." There was a confused pause before Belinda's sugary tone hardened with suspicion. "Lila? What are you talking ab?" But her words were drowned out by a deafening feedback whine as our call was broadcast on every screen from Times Square to L.A. Her perfectly made-up face, twisted in bewilderment, suddenly plastered across millions of homes. "You see, Belinda," I stated, my voice ringing with furious conviction, "my newfound wealth is just as much of a facade as your self-proclaimed influence over the sad, desperate fools who hang on your every Instagram post." Leaning forward, I braced my hands on the desk and leveled my gaze directly at the camera's unblinking eye. "The truth is, we've all been taken for a ride by two outrageous con artists, consumed by delusion, greed, and their own narcissistic pursuit of fame and fortune at any cost." My finger stabbed viciously at the image of Derek now appearing beside Belinda, his expression one of abject horror as he realized our private conversation was being broadcast for the world to hear. "This low-life scumbag you've so readily attached your vapid ambitions to didn't just cheat on his wife and mother of his children, he tried to claim the entirety of a lottery jackpot. He didn't even win alone." I was shaking with rage, but a vicious sort of glee burned within me at seeing the blood drain from Derek's face as the video feed switched to authenticated footage of him, Alex, and I purchasing the fateful lotto ticket years ago. Every duplicitous act, every underhanded scheme, every conniving lie that both Derek and Belinda had spun to feed their ego, I unleashed it all in one brutal, damning torrent, letting the truth scorch away their fragile delusions before a captive audience of millions. And as the look of smug indifference melted off Belinda's face to be replaced by abject horror, I felt a twisted sense of gratification at the fractures already splintering through her and Derek's sad, self-indulgent fantasies. This was only the beginning of their downfall. I would make sure of it. I would not rest until their hollow lives were shattered into a million pieces, paying penance for every ounce of pain and disillusionment they'd put me through. Steeling my nerves, I met Derek's terrified gaze burning through the screen and allowed a cold smirk to crease my lips. "This is for all those times you accused me of never believing in you, Derek. Well, believe me when I say, this nightmare is only just beginning." The ballroom was packed, every eye locked on the center stage as I ascended the steps and approached the podium. My heels clicked loudly against the polished wood, the only sound in that breathless hush. This was it, the final phase of my months-long vendetta. One last chance to drive the knife into the rotting heart of Derek and Belinda's sham relationship before a crowd of their erstwhile admirers. One corner of my mouth curled into a vindictive smirk. They'd slithered their way onto the guest list for this self-congratulatory gala, under the delusion they could ingratiate themselves, soil their way into high society's good graces. Little did those two vapid fools realize they were the ones being played for fools. The air was thick with palpable tension as I reached the podium. Leaning forward, I let my eyes bore into the squirming figures of Derek and Belinda situated at a front table, their arrogant expressions crumbling beneath my unrelenting glare. "Friends, esteemed colleagues," I began, my voice rippling through the cavernous chamber. "I'd like to extend my gratitude for your presence here tonight at this annual celebration of entrepreneurial spirit and community innovation." Murmurs of polite applause spread through the crowd before I silenced them with an upraised hand. However, as many of you are no doubt aware, there exists a serpent lurking in our midst. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. A vile deceiver who has brazenly perverted the symbols of success and self-made prosperity we honor here for his own ego-driven delusions of grandeur. Belinda bristled at the obvious slight, shooting an accusatory glare at Derek, who shrank in his chair like a kicked dog. How bitterly ironic that his craving for validation had turned the woman he sought it from against him within moments. "You all know who I'm referring to," I stated, my lip curling with disgust. Derek Jefferson, a narcissistic, emotionally stunted leech who lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone around him in pursuit of the trappings of fortune. It was like a dam bursting at those words, the once polite crowd erupting into shouts of condemnation and outrage. Caught completely off guard by my vicious assault, Derek jerked upright, his eyes swiveling in panic. "That's not true," he barked futilely over the din, before pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's the one who never believed in me, who tried to tear me down at every turn." The crowd's scorn intensified tenfold at his pitiful deflection, hisses and boos raining down on him until his face purpled. "Silence!" I roared, raising my voice above the furor. As the room stilled once more, I leaned towards the podium, lips curling into a sneer. "I did believe in you, Derek. I believed you were a good man once, until your arrogance and greed twisted you into this delusional, hate-filled stranger before us now." My steely gaze landed on Belinda next, watching her shrink under my withering contempt. "As for your pathetic sidekick, well, need I say more than she's living proof of the depths to which you've allowed your ambition and ego to corrode your morality and self-worth?" Slamming my palms on the podium, I straightened, fury blazing in my eyes. "So go ahead, shroud yourselves in as much counterfeit wealth and materialism as you desire to mask your inescapable insecurities. At your empty, rotted cores, you're nothing more than snake oil salesmen, profiteering off lies and exploiting the ambitions of others for your own soulless gain." From the back of the ballroom, a loud cry cut through the silence. "You make me sick, man." I smirked, recognizing Alex's voice as he stepped forward, derision etched across his face as he locked eyes with the man he once considered a friend. "All this time using people and spinning lies to support your sad power trip? And for what?" As the crowd swelled around him with murmurs of agreement, Alex jabbed an accusing finger at the stunned pair. "You gave up relationships, sacrificed integrity, your entire value system, all for this flagrant ego trip of a sham empire. Well, joke's on you, Jefferson, because the only thing more bankrupt than your finances is your self-respect." Somewhere within the throng of voices condemning them, I heard Belinda's shrill tones pleading with Derek for answers, demanding to know the extent of his latest betrayal. Their toxic, symbiotic relationship of narcissism and self-delusion finally fracturing under its own weight. At the eye of the storm, Derek resembled a scared child, stunned into silence by the harsh, unrelenting reality crashing down upon him. The karmic wheel spinning payback for his inflicted unraveling. Meeting my gaze one last time, his eyes held the slightest flicker of raw emotion. Fear, betrayal, simmering hatred, all roiling together. In that moment I reflected not on the monster he'd become, but the man whose love and faith I'd once cherished. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anguish, just empty vindication. And as the roaring wave of scorn swallowed him whole, I turned my back and strode away. content to let the tides of public opinion and karma's bitter justice sweep Derek under for good, this time. The roar of the crowd was deafening as I stepped out into the marbled lobby, flanked by Nora and Alex. But the vengeful cheers and chants felt strangely hollow, like a dull thud reverberating through my bones. "I can't believe we finally did it," Nora breathed, her eyes alight with vindictive triumph. That oily snake and his cheap tramp got exactly what was coming to them. I should have felt elated in that moment. Relieved that my months-long quest to expose Derek and Belinda's sham had reached its climactic peak. Instead, I only felt numb. Perhaps it was the sobering reminder that no amount of public shaming or loss of status could undo the damage of Derek's ultimate betrayal. Or maybe, deep down, I mourned having to bury the shredded remnants of the man I once loved. A familiar voice shattered my turbulent thoughts. Well, if it isn't the mastermind herself. Derek's acidic sneer hit me like a slap as he pushed through the crowd still loitering outside, Belinda trailing miserably behind him. You ruined everything." The blonde's voice cracked with equal parts fury and despair as she rounded on me. "All that effort, all those lies and manipulations trying to claw my way into high society, undone by your sad, jealous revenge ploy." I regarded her coolly as she fought to maintain her poise, straightening her bedazzled gown with trembling hands. "I may have been delusionally chasing vapid social status and wealth, but at least I still have my dignity." She spat the words with as much venom as she could muster amidst the tattered ruins of her facade. "You're a sad, empty husk masquerading as a self-righteous icon of morality," Derek hissed, his eyes glittering with pure venom. "But I see the truth. Lila, you're just as desperate and spiteful as the day I left you behind." His lips twisted into a mocking leer. "Couldn't handle the fact that I'd finally surpassed your meager expectations for me, risen above the limitations you tried shackling me The delusional rant was cut off by a harsh slap, the crack echoing through the lobby. Derek recoiled, clutching his reddened cheek as Alex stepped forward, eyes blazing. "That's enough out of you, you arrogant bastard." His voice dripped with disgust. "The fact you're still trying to play the martyr here just proves how completely delusional you are." Derek opened his mouth to respond, but Alex barreled onwards. "You were my friend once, Derek. We had dreams, ambitions, but you let greed and narcissism consume you until you alienated everyone who gave a damn." Shaking his head slowly, he glanced over at the shuddering wreck of a woman clinging to Derek's arm. "Both of you deserve each other's vapid, hollow company, living the rest of your days shrouded in self-denial and meaningless status trappings." Alex's gaze hardened into a glare as it swung back to lock with Derek's, his voice turning to steel. "I just hope, when you hit rock bottom after poisoning yourselves on those delusions, that you remember what it cost you to throw away everyone who actually gave a damn." A tense silence fell over the lobby, until I felt Nora's hand on my arm, pulling me gently away. "Come on, sis, let's leave these sad losers to rot in the mess of their own making." As we turned to head for the exit, Belinda's voice rang out, desperate and pleading. "Wait!" She lurched forward, clutching Derek's arm in a white-knuckled grip. Just tell me one thing, Lila." Her eyes searched mine, wide and haunted. Is it true? Was everything a lie? This whole relationship, Derek's ambitions, our entire future planned out together? For a moment I considered lying to her, letting her delude herself a little longer before the imminent crash back to reality. But one look at the broken shell of a woman before me, and I knew even the slightest white lie would be too cruel. "Yes, Belinda," I stated simply, letting the truth sink in like a dagger between her ribs. It was all a lie, just empty delusions built on a foundation of greed and ego. Derek regarded me with a mix of fury and dawning horror, as if the gravity of what he'd sacrificed was just starting to take hold. But I felt no pity, no sorrow, only the faintest twinge of lamentful nostalgia for the man whose potential had led me to fall for him once upon a time. Lacing my fingers through Nora's, I guided us past the dissolving wreckage of Derek and Belinda's sham relationship without a second glance. As the revolving doors closed behind us, I steeled myself for the new chapter awaiting me beyond this painful era. Stripping the scales of delusion from my eyes was just the start of a long journey towards rediscovering my self-worth and independence. but at least now I could begin that path unburdened by the hollow shackles of arrogance and lies that had dragged me down for far too long. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 6 months later, I stood in the shadow of the gleaming high-rise that housed my new business headquarters and took a deep, contented breath. The brisk spring air was a welcome tonic, a sensory reminder of the fresh start and rebirth I was finally allowing myself after so many months of being bogged down in darkness and anger. "Can you believe this place, sis?" Nora looped her arm through mine, her eyes shining with pride as she surveyed our newly established empire. All stemming from that vindictive little revenge scheme that put that douchebag Derek in his place. My lips quirked into a small smile. In the aftermath of my very public dismantling of my ex-husband's rampant delusions, the settlement I received from our divorce proceedings, coupled with my share of the lottery winnings, had afforded me ample opportunity to invest in new ventures. And with Nora's marketing and branding genius as my co-pilot, we rapidly transformed that influx of cash into a burgeoning multimedia corporation dedicated to empowering women who'd suffered at the hands of greedy, self-serving men like Derek. It was strangely fitting, really, allowing the ashes of my former marriage to smolder and ignite the flames of a new, self-made legacy. A firm rebuttal to the notion I had ever tried to stifle Derek's dreams and ambitions. The guy was a delusional, narcissistic train wreck from day one. I just happened to be the one miraculously cashing in on the fallout. You know, Alex is still reeling over us donating a chunk of our launch capital to his counseling program for disadvantaged youth. Nora shook her head in amazement. Guy was practically in tears when he found out. "He deserves it," I stated simply, squeezing her arm. "God knows he endured enough turmoil sticking by us through the darkest stretches of that whole sordid mess with Derek and Belinda." A twisted smirk crossed my lips as I recalled the high-profile legal battle erupted when Alex contested the lottery winnings. Derek's snarling, bombastic attempts to claim the whole jackpot for himself were swiftly shut down by a mountain of authenticated evidence and a restraining order. Meanwhile, Belinda's desperate gambit to sue me for defamation and emotional damages imploded before it even left the ground after the avalanche of receipts I produced, exposing her as a shameless con artist and grifter only out for self-gain. By the time the dust settled, she and Derek were both pariah, bankrupted by legal fees and public scrutiny into their grifting ways. The power couple delusion was shattered utterly. And through it all, Alex remained a steady, supportive ally through the darkest days. A true friend who never judged, only encouraged me to channel the vindictive anger into something constructive. That thought made my steps lighter as I strode into the towering lobby, drinking in the sights and sounds of my creation coming to life. Just off the polished marble floors, a cluster of women from our marketing team huddled around a television monitor, eagerly reviewing edits for our latest female empowerment campaign. "Looking amazing, ladies," I called out, eliciting a chorus of cheers and warm greetings. Behind the front desk, my new assistant looked up and waved, crisp and professional on the outside, with the soul of a fearless fighter against injustice. That was the foundation Nora and I were determined to establish. A blazing torch to illuminate every dark path other women might tread on their quest for rebirth and renewal. As I rode the elevator upwards, my mind drifted back to those dark days when Derek's callous betrayal had nearly broken me. If someone had told me then about the self-made phoenix I would emerge as down the line, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it. Yet here I was, at the precipice of an empire built from the ashes of delusion and deceit. An unstoppable force, fueled by a simple credo: never let ego, complacency, or the agendas of others blind you to your own potential and self-worth. The doors slid open to reveal my corner office awaiting, a sprawling, sunlit sanctuary of inspiration and possibility. Striding to the floor-to-ceiling windows, I let my gaze roam across the endless cityscape sprawled out below. This life, this invigorating hustle and soaring ambition, it was the polar opposite to the empty, vapid delusions Derek once accused me of stunting. And in that moment, I felt pity for him more than anything. An eternity confined to his own narcissistic hell while I flourished in the light. That was the ultimate revenge. As I settled into my plush leather chair, the phone began ringing shrilly, jarring me from my reverie. With a self-assured smile, I scooped up the receiver. "Lila Jefferson," I answered crisply. "Let's get to work." The phone call that shattered my perception of my husband came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen putting the final touches on Elise's 7th birthday cake when I heard Declan's raised voice seeping through the crack in his study door. "I don't care what it takes, Davis. Just make sure those documents disappear before the feds get a hold of them," he growled in a tone I didn't recognize. "We're talking millions on the line here. Do whatever you have to." My heart pounded as I strained to make out the muffled response on the other end of the line. When had my loving husband turned so menacing? Frozen in place, my hands still gripping the piping bag, I tried to rationalize the outburst as stress from work. But that explanation rang hollow as his words replayed in my mind, threats and sums of money so large I couldn't conceptualize them. Just then, Elise bounded into the kitchen in her pajamas, oblivious to the storm brewing down the hall. "Mommy, is the cake ready yet?" she asked, craning her neck up towards the treat on the counter. I forced a smile, not wanting to frighten her. "Almost, baby. Why don't you go pick out a movie for us to watch together?" Squealing with delight, she scurried off to the living room, while I stood paralyzed, my gut twisting with dread. Who was this volatile man I thought I knew so well, the same person I'd built a life with over the last decade? Moments later, Declan sauntered into the kitchen, smoothing his tousled hair back into place as he approached. Before I could confront him about the call, he pulled me into an embrace, planting a kiss on my forehead. "Smells delicious, babe," he said, eyeing the sugary concoction. "Can't wait to see the look on Ellie's face tomorrow." I clung to him desperately, searching his warm brown eyes for any flicker of the rage I'd heard moments ago. But his expression remained tender and serene as ever, as if that disturbing call had been merely a terrible dream. My instincts warned me something was askew, but I questioned myself. Could I completely upend our family on a few overheard fragments, no matter how alarming? Pushing the nagging doubts aside for the moment, I smiled up at him. "She's going to be so thrilled. Maybe we could kick off her big day with a horseback riding lesson like she's been asking." Declan chuckled, smoothing my hair from my face. "Anything for my 2 favorite girls." That night, as I gazed at him snoring peacefully beside me, I knew our cozy world was on the precipice of crumbling. My husband, my rock, my partner of 10 years, had a sinister secret. And I realized with gut-wrenching certainty that unraveling it would be the only way to truly know the man I'd once trusted with every fiber of my being. Over the next few weeks, Declan's behavior only grew more erratic and disturbing. Simple things, like his work stories not adding up or a detached demeanor when playing with Elise, raised red flags I could no longer ignore. One night after tucking Elise in, I decided to finally confront him about the suspicious call. "Honey, can we talk?" He looked up from his laptop, brow furrowed. "What's up?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted what I'd overheard that fateful evening, the hushed threats, the mention of incriminating documents. By the time I finished, his face had drained of color. "You were eavesdropping on my private conversations?" he snapped, slamming the laptop shut. I recoiled at the venom in his tone. "I didn't mean to, Just what? Thought you'd play private investigator on your own husband?" He rose from his chair, towering over me. "Those calls were confidential business matters, not some tawdry affair for you to stick your nose in." Indignation flared within me. "Declan, you were talking about hiding evidence and paying people off. What am I supposed to think?" His jaw tightened. "You're supposed to trust that I'd never do anything to jeopardize this family. But I see now that was a mistake." With that, he brushed past me and stormed out of the room, leaving me shaken and utterly adrift. Was the man I loved truly capable of such sinister deeds? The next day, the local news provided a chilling answer. Declan's employer, an investment firm downtown, was under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Reeling from the revelation, I scrolled through the damning coverage, each breathless report more lurid than the last. That's when Elise wandered into the room, amber eyes wide. "Mommy, why are they saying such mean things about Daddy's work on TV?" I scrambled to find reassuring words, but she seemed to read the worry etched on my face. "Don't worry. she said, lowering her voice to a whisper. Daddy told me not to talk about his secret meetings at home or he'll get really mad. But I won't say anything, I promise. My blood turned to ice in my veins as her innocent words detonated the final shred of doubt. My husband, my daughter's hero, was not only mixed up in illicit corporate schemes, but forcing a 7-year-old to cover up for his misdeeds. Rage engulfed me, burning hotter with every ragged breath until I could scarcely see straight. That evening, while Declan sat fuming in the den, I scoured his study for any trace of evidence to confirm my darkest suspicions. In his desk drawer, buried beneath reams of financial reports, I found a disposable prepaid phone, likely the device he'd used to make those cryptic calls. But it was the sheaf of documents underneath that made my heart plummet into my gut. Emails, incriminating spreadsheets, offshore bank statements, all leading an unmistakable trail back to Declan's role in pillaging funds and defrauding clients. The confidential business matters he'd raged about were nothing more than a litany of high-stakes crimes designed to bankroll our luxurious lifestyle. My hands trembled as I clutched the documents, the realm of plausible deniability evaporating like a noxious gas. The man I'd loved, the father of my child, was a con man teetering on the edge of sheer criminality, and he'd willingly entangled our entire family in his web of deceit. With the damning evidence clutched in my hands, I knew I had to confront Declan again, no matter how explosive the fallout. As I marched into the den, resolution steeled my nerves against the fear bubbling in my gut. We need to talk, now. I slapped the incriminating papers onto his desk, scattering them across the polished mahogany surface. His head whipped up, eyes widening as he registered the disclosed secrets. Where did you get those? He growled, shoving his chair back with a harsh screech. From your locked desk drawer, the one with all your little secrets tucked away. I crossed my arms, holding his seething gaze. I knew those calls were more than just confidential business, but this... God, Declan, how could you get mixed up in something so blatantly illegal? In a blur of motion, he shot to his feet and closed the distance between us, fists clenched. You had no right going through my private things, he roared, spittle flying as his face flushed crimson. Those documents are part of an active federal case. You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you could bring down on this family? I stood my ground, crushing down the urge to flinch. The only one bringing trouble is you and your shady Wall Street dealings. What about our daughter, huh? How does getting her trapped in your sordid web of fraud not eating you up inside? Declan's hardened expression faltered, the slightest crack forming in his rage mask. Elise? He sank back onto the couch, dragging a hand down his face. You think I don't agonize over putting you both at risk? Those spreadsheets, those accounts, that was all to secure a future for our family, babe. A future better than anything my old man could scrape together with his deadbeat salary. I scoffed bitterly at his attempts to rationalize the unforgivable. And having your little girl lie for you, keep your criminal secrets, how does that noble motive fit into your twisted plans? A muscle ticked in his jaw as we faced off in tense silence, the weight of his innumerable transgressions pressing down like a shroud. Just as I opened my mouth to unleash another fusillade, a tiny voice piped up from the doorway. Mommy? Daddy? Elise lingered on the threshold in her flannel nightgown, eyes swollen from crying. I had another bad dream about the monsters. My heart shattered into pieces as realization washed over me with brutal clarity. In her childlike innocence, she'd unconsciously represented the darkness pervading her own home. The true monsters weren't a fantasy, but the very man tasked with protecting her. Declan softened for a fleeting moment, lifting his arms as if to embrace our daughter. But as soon as Elise shrank back, that tender facade crumpled, his face contorting in a foul leer. Get out, Elise, he spat with repulsive venom. This is grown-up talk, and you've stuck your nose where it doesn't belong for far too long already. Before I could react, he snatched a paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the terrified girl. It struck the doorframe mere inches from her head, shards of glass detonating in all directions as she released a blood-curdling wail. Declan, you psychopath, I screeched, shoving him back as he advanced on the sobbing child. Get away from her. Gathering Elise into my arms, I fled the den in blind panic, my little girl's desperate cries echoing through the cavernous home that had once shielded us so lovingly. Behind the mahogany doors, Declan's own monstrous roars reverberated like some demonic force unleashed. As I clutched my baby to my chest, her warmth the only solace from the horror, one certainty crystallized amid the chaos. Whatever the cost, I had to extract us from this nightmare before his swirling malevolence consumed us both. The morning after Declan's violent outburst, a heavy pall hung over our once idyllic home. Elise clung to me like a second skin, whimpering at the slightest creak or groan of the old house. My own heart raced with each unexplained thump, half expecting my unhinged husband to come raging through the door at any moment. By the time the pale winter light seeped through the curtains, I could no longer abide the sickening tension. I had to regain some semblance of control over this rapidly fracturing situation. Steeling my nerves, I tucked Elise into the living room with her favorite movies before creeping down the hall toward Declan's study. The door was ajar, the room beyond disheveled from our cataclysmic fight the previous evening. Books and papers were strewn about, the heavy crystal paperweight lying in a shower of glittering shards, a silent herald of the violence that had shattered our domestic peace. Bracing myself, I nudged the door open farther and stepped inside. Declan sat hunched behind the desk, nursing a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. His shirt hung untucked, his normally immaculate hair disheveled. At the sound of my footsteps, his bloodshot eyes flicked up with a chilling cynicism. "So," he began, vowels thick and slurred, "the self-righteous princess has emerged to cast judgment on her monstrous husband." I battled to keep my voice from wavering. "Declan, we need to talk about last night." "About your treacherous snooping?" he snarled, slamming his palm on the desk and making me flinch. "About throwing away everything we've built with your childish tantrums?" My mouth set in a grim line as I fought the urge to recoil from his acidic vitriol. This poisonous version of the man I married couldn't be reasoned with, not until I exposed the root of his malice. "If you think protecting our family means terrorizing our daughter, then yes, we have a serious problem," I shot back, unflinching. "Those business dealings you claim were a means to an end? Those were criminal acts, Declan. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. And you forced Elise to cover for your shady tracks." To my shock, a cruel chuckle rumbled from his throat as he knocked back another swig of his drink. "You want to talk crimes, princess? Let's start with your flagrant violation of attorney-client privilege when you rifled through those documents. That's what, 3 years in the slammer right there?" As the words slithered from his mouth, a glacial chill gripped me. In his twisted reality, I was the criminal for uncovering his misdeeds. "Not to mention my future earning potential, you've utterly decimated with your self-righteous crusade," he continued with a disturbing calm, rising from his chair to stalk closer. "You think your paltry pay uploading stock photos even qualifies as providing for this family? Without my income stream, we're left with what? That fleabag cottage your deadbeat dad left you in his estate." My insides reeled from the verbal onslaught as he towered over me, the scent of whiskey and stale cologne invading my senses. Though I longed to flee from the unstable fire raging in his eyes, something stronger took root, a primal instinct to protect my child from this inexplicable darkness. "You're delusional, Declan," I managed through gritted teeth, willing my hands to remain steady. "After everything you've done, jeopardizing Elise's well-being, you think you have any claim over providing for us? You're going to jail, you sick bastard, even if I have to make sure of it myself." At those words, any vestiges of the man I'd once loved contorted into a vicious snarl of hatred. His fingers coiled around my throat with preternatural strength as he slammed me against the desk, upending papers and trinkets in a deafening clatter. "You sanctimonious bitch," he bellowed in my face, spittle flying as his forearm crushed my windpipe. "I'll show you delusional." As Declan's snarling face hovered above me, all reason and humanity extinguished behind his crazed eyes, I felt a cold certainty. This man intended to kill me. I clawed desperately at his vice-like grip, but his forearm remained an inflexible bar across my windpipe. Black spots erupted in my vision as I choked on the scant airflow. In a final burst of adrenaline, I slammed my knee upwards, making sickening contact. Declan recoiled with a guttural groan, his hands flying to his groin as I crumpled to the floor, wheezing in ragged gulps of precious oxygen. "You crazy bitch!" he growled through clenched teeth. "I'll make you regret that." Sensing his fury reigniting, I scrabbled backwards towards the door on all fours, desperate to put distance between us. Just as his hulking form advanced again, little feet pounded up the hallway. "Mommy?" Elise appeared in the doorway, her tiny voice cutting through the chaos. Declan froze, seemingly snapping out of his psychotic trance for a fleeting moment as his gaze fell upon our cowering daughter. She clutched her tattered stuffed bunny to her chest, those soulful amber eyes now marred with terror. In that suspended breath, a profound shift overcame my husband's face, not one of remorse, but eerie calculation as he processed the situation. When he finally spoke, the malice had receded, replaced by a sickening false calm. "It's okay, Princess. Mommy and I were just having a grown-up disagreement." He straightened his rumpled shirt, smoothing back his disheveled hair in a perverse mimicry of composure. "Why don't you go pick out a puzzle for us to do together? Make it a hard one." Elise shrank back uncertainly, her small frame trembling as her gaze flickered between the two of us. "But I heard yelling." "Don't question me, Elise," Declan erupted, his failed mask of tranquility shattering like a ceramic vase. "Just do as you're told for once." With a terrified squeak, she scurried away down the hall, no doubt scurrying to the safety of her bedroom to escape his towering presence. Tears burned in my eyes as his cruelty lanced my heart. Once the echo of her footsteps faded, my husband turned his smoldering glare back towards me, his expression morphing into one of chilling resolution. "I don't know what insane game you think you're playing at, Cora." He began in a measured tone that felt more unsettling than his previous rage. "But I'll be damned if I let you take my family away from me, the life I've bled and sacrificed for." He stalked towards his disheveled desk and snatched up his cell phone, thumbs flying over the screen. "What are you doing?" I croaked out, dreading his response. "Calling my lawyers," he replied coldly. "Getting ahead of the shitstorm you've unleashed before you can go broadcasting any more of those corporate secrets you stole." "Those documents prove you're a criminal," I spat, fury reigniting within my battered body. "Those documents," he countered with a cruel smile, "are inadmissible evidence that I have a right to protect through attorney-client privilege. You violated that sacred trust when you stole them, which my legal team will make sure the courts recognize as a felony." Dread coiled in my stomach as his twisted logic rang terrifyingly true. In my desperation to expose his depravity, had I inadvertently handed him the bullet for my own demise? "So you can either come clean with me, cooperate to fix this damn mess quietly," Declan continued, that reptilian smile never faltering, "or you can take your chances as an accomplice obstructing a federal investigation. Up to you, babe." In that moment, his cellular chirped to life as our bank's number flashed across the screen. With a sardonic wink, my husband raised the device to his ear. "Looks like we need to have a talk about our finances, too." Over the next several days, Declan's callous dominance only tightened its oppressive grip over our household. Once my initial banking passwords were breached, he systematically drained my personal accounts, leaving me financially marooned. "Can't have you siphoning off money for some harebrained escape plot, now can we?" He taunted with a cruel smile, slapping the latest zero-balance statements onto the kitchen counter in front of me. I clenched my fists, rage and hopelessness warring within me like combatants in the Colosseum. Forced into destitution by the very man I'd vowed to love and honor, I had nowhere to turn, no funds to subsidize an escape for Elise and myself. It wasn't long before Declan's smothering control extended far beyond simple finance. His hired legal muscle churned out restraining dictates by the hour. I was prohibited from contacting law enforcement or advocacy services, removing Elise from the premises, even making unauthorized use of the home's amenities. Like a gazelle ensnared in the python's voracious coils, I found every desperate bid for freedom only entrenching me deeper in Declan's meticulously constructed trap. Whenever I tried to slip away for even a private phone call, his hired goons would materialize from the shadows, eyes concealed behind mirrored shades as they blocked my path with crossed arms. All the while, Declan would smirk in the background, secure in the knowledge that I was neutered, utterly impotent. And always lurking at the fringes of this waking nightmare was my innocent little girl, wounded eyes silently pleading for circumstances she couldn't comprehend. My heart shattered every time Elise instinctively shrank from her father's presence, the emotional scars of his violent outbursts now seared into her psyche. At night, I lay awake plotting any conceivable path out of this fresh hell, contacting family, taking out loans, scraping together whatever meager funds I could to finance a clean, evaporative exit. But Declan had foreseen every eventuality, leaving me more cornered than a sewer rat in a flaming baited trap. On the 7th interminable day of this perverted house arrest, I finally accepted the only glimmer of hope was to outmaneuver Declan through guile. As I pretended to drift into yet another fitful rest that evening, I clutched the disposable phone I'd covertly procured like a lifeline. Painstakingly, I tapped out a coded message to the only friend I could still trust, praying she would understand the layered urgency of my desperate plea. If anyone could bail me out of this steadily calcifying prison, it would be Gwen. My thumb hovered over the send button, both elation and trepidation gripping me. One errant movement, one infinitesimal slip-up, and Declan would sniff out my gambit before I could so much as blink. I had one tenuous shot to light the fuse for our potential salvation. No more delaying the inevitable. I punched send, sealing my family's fate. Either freedom beckoned over the horizon, or the merciless anvil would clamp down with finality. For the next 12 hours, I sat vigil in excruciating silence, willing my expression into one of serene obliviousness whenever the pretense of breakfast or Declan's leering presence demanded it. My gut roiled with every unaccounted-for creak, bracing for the inevitable confrontation over my badly concealed transgressions. Just after noon chimed, the Winchester doorbell resounded through the foyer, nearly causing my heart to detonate from my chest cavity. I froze, ears straining, as thudding footsteps and muted voices preceded the study door banging open. What is the meaning of this? Declan roared as 3 grim-faced federal agents swarmed into the living area, badges displayed. I scrambled to my feet, hands shaking with a dizzying cocktail of relief and mortal terror. One semi-automatic sidearm swung in my direction before steadying inches from my face. "Cora Manchester," the lead agent barked, "we have an authorized warrant for your protective custody." As his compatriots slapped tactical cuffs on my bewildered husband, Declan wheeled on me with feral hatred contorting his features. "You lying, traitorous wench," he bellowed, spittle flying as the agents wrenched his arms behind his back. "After everything I've done for this family, this is how you repay me?" The rage and humiliation radiating from him in scathing waves should have paralyzed me. But as my gaze met Elise's terrified one peering from around the staircase corner, only one Schlene overwhelmed every primal instinct: protection. I had to see this through for her sake. Drawing a fortifying breath, I steadied my nerves under Declan's smoldering glare. "What you've done for us? Your fraud and criminality cost us any ounce of a real family. You deluded animal. Just be grateful I've only seen that you faced justice and not a bullet." With that, I lifted my manacled wrists and allowed the agents to lead me towards the phalanx of federal SUVs idling outside, retribution's resounding thunder finally exorcising the tyranny festering under my own roof. As the FBI convoy roared away from the curb, sirens wailing, I clutched Elise's trembling form against me in the back of the armored SUV. My little girl's cheeks glistened with terrified tears, her tiny hands fisting my sweater like a lifeline. "It's okay, baby," I murmured into her soft auburn hair, struggling to modulate my own ragged breaths. "Daddy can't hurt us anymore." The words felt bizarrely hollow, despite the iron truth of the sentiment. After so many weeks languishing under Declan's escalating reign of terror, the very notion of freedom seemed utterly paradoxical. No sooner had the thought materialized than a cacophonous explosion detonated a few blocks away, the shockwave rocking our vehicle like a skipping stone. I instinctively smothered Elise's tiny frame against me as smoke and debris billowed into view through the SUV's tinted windows. "All units be advised, we have shots fired!" One of the agents barked into his radio, his jaw clenching. "The target's residence has been hit with an incendiary device." My heart plummeted in concert with the acrid smoke billowing from the fresh scene of devastation. The house. Our home. Declan. Before I could voice the kaleidoscope of questions rocketing through my psyche, the agent's radio squawked again with a strained voice. "This is Stryker Unit, requesting immediate backup. We are taking sustained automatic fire from unknown shooters inside the house. The bomb squad and HRT need to roll out immediately." Elise's piercing wail cut through the tactical chatter as more thunderous detonations shook our vehicle like a rag doll amid the maelstrom. Though every parental instinct demanded I provide soothing affirmations, I could only gaze on in numb shock at the surreal tableau of fire and violence erupting around us. Declan's true depravity knew no bounds. Rather than face the consequences of his actions, he would indiscriminately slaughter anyone and anything in his path. Before my scattered thoughts could fully coalesce, a hissed order crackled over the radio for our transport team to peel away from the burgeoning war zone. The engine roared back to life as the SUV executed an armored reversal and peeled away at breakneck speed with an earth-shuddering squeal of reinforced tires. Metal barricades and concrete jersey walls whipped past the windows in a sickening blur as we careened away from the deafening violence. Still, I could not tear my eyes from the carnage painting itself across the horizon in shades of fire and smoke, all born from the choices of a single monstrous man. A husband and father who so blithely incinerated the laws of man and God to assuage his own hubris. When the tremors battering our vehicle finally subsided, one of the agents slumped back against the reinforced partition with a ragged sigh. Christ on a cracker, they weren't kidding that this guy was batshit crazy. He cast a sidelong look at Elise and me, bundled together on the bench seat. "Sorry about that, kid. Your daddy clearly has some real problems keeping his business clean." Before I could unleash the torrent of outrage and venom simmering beneath my skin, Elise peered up at me with those saucer-wide amber eyes, seeming to plead through her torrent of tears. Throat aching, I forced down the growling invectives clamoring for release and simply pulled her trembling little body tighter against my own. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of shouted orders and screeching vehicular cavalcades, speeding in all directions. At some point, reinforced assault vehicles joined our armored caravan, heavily armed HRT officers clinging to the rumbling transports like grim-faced gargoyles. As our path curved towards the heart of an auxiliary command staging area, it became abundantly clear how catastrophic Declan's violent unraveling had become. Choppers swarmed overhead, hovering floodlights bleaching the ground in clinical white, while robotic drones flickered through the air like mechanized insects. The SUV finally rolled to a shuddering stop as our doors were wrenched open from outside, figures clad in tactical gear efficiently ushering us into the subterranean refuge beneath the staging area. Weaving through prefab command modules and field terminals glowing with encrypted data, a towering silhouette from the bustle to greet our bedraggled party. Agent Vanover, the grizzled woman in a sharp-breast suit intoned by way of greeting, those pale eyes boring into me with unsettling intensity. "I see, Mr. Manchester's threats weren't just saber-rattling after all." Before I could respond, her gaze drifted down to take in Elise's hunched, quivering posture. "My God," she breathed, something like genuine pity creasing her stern features. "That poor child." It was a simple reaction, yet those 3 syllables detonated the dam of pent-up emotion, trauma, and sheer, unadulterated relief within me in a torrent of throat-cleaving sobs. I'm not sure whether it was Elise's broken whimpers or my own gulping gasps for air that finally breached the berserker fog of terror and rage and shame clogging my mind. All I knew was that in that singular crystalline moment, every last ounce of fear evaporated in the presence of human compassion and the promise of justice. Whatever blood toll awaited back at our former home, whatever unspeakable price the demons of Declan's reckoning would extract, we would survive this crucible. More importantly, my little girl was finally safe from her father's maniacal shadow once and for all. In the aftermath of Declan's explosive unraveling, our lives were upended in more ways than I could have envisioned. In addition to the charred husk of our former home, every asset my husband had illicitly amassed over his criminal career was seized. Offshore accounts drained, property deeds reclaimed, even the luxury SUV impounded as criminal evidence. Not that I mourned any of those ill-gotten trappings. If rebuilding from scratch was the penance for untangling myself from Declan's poisonous web, I would gladly pay it 1,000,000 times over. What did gut me like a bayonet thrust was the collateral fallout for Elise. My sweet baby girl, already bearing scars far too deep for her tender years, now had her innocence compounded by the trauma of witnessing such violence and depravity. Those first few nights alone together in the Spartan safe house, I would jolt awake in cold sweats to her muffled sobs from the adjoining room. Each time I would gather her up in my arms, rocking her gently as she unleashed the torrent of fear and bewilderment in rambling pleas to make the monsters go away. It shattered my heart into shards to see her so petrified, so unmoored from any sense of security I had failed so catastrophically to provide. All I could do was swathe her in my embrace and murmur soothing mantras about the darkness passing, about brighter days peeking over the horizon. In those first turbulent weeks, I shunned all inquiries about media appearances or interviews regarding Declan's high-profile crimes. The DA could bloviate all she wanted at press conferences, decrying his unforgivable violations and staggering breach of public trust. In my book, the only part that mattered was that he was off the streets, remanded to federal custody to fester in his own savagery. What did consume my every waking moment was ensuring the return of any funds or assets he had covertly drained or transferred from my own accounts during our domestic hostage situation. Armed with the documentation of his malfeasance, it took numerous court dates, but eventually the money he had so maliciously stripped from me was returned in full. Not that I had any intention of replicating our formerly opulent lifestyle. The first call I made after replenishing my finances was to my older sister down in Richmond, asking if she could watch Elise for a few weeks while I took care of some personal affairs. When my rental car finally rolled up the gravel drive to our childhood home, the old cabin appeared just as ramshackle and weather-beaten as it had in my youth. Roof shingles askew, the wrapped porch slightly sagging in places. Yet the mere sight of those familiar angles untouched by Declan's darkness had hot tears misting my eyes. My father had been adamant about never selling this rustic mountain retreat, his personal Eden far from the trappings of the material world. Though only large enough for a simple 2 bedrooms, the property encompassed nearly 100 wooded acres, plenty of open space for 2 lost souls in desperate need of healing and sanctuary. Over the following year, I channeled every ounce of personal revenue into restoring the ramshackle cabin and its surrounding land. It wasn't merely a renovation in the structural sense, but an active exorcism of the toxicity and despair that had threatened to subsume my very existence back in the city. With each newly installed window overlooking the gently rolling hills and sycamore groves, I could feel layers of psychic grime slowing away. Every fresh coat of sun-bleached paint helped cauterize the mental and emotional lacerations inflicted by my monstrous former partner's madness. And with each lilting brook babbling gently nearby, and every chorus of cicadas trilling beneath the star-speckled canopy at night, I could sense Elise's spirit regaining its resiliency in aching increments. Her initial night terrors gradually subsided, replaced with restorative slumbers that left her bounding through wildflower fields each new morning with a renewed spark of innocent mirth. By the time the cabin and surrounding acreage had been fully rehabilitated, my own sense of shattered self finally began to knit itself back together as well. I was no longer the brittle, gasping shell of a woman torn asunder by deception and psychological warfare. Nor was I some brazen victim raging incessantly for retribution, thirsting for Declan's eternal suffering. In a very real sense, I was reborn from the smoldering ashes of my former life. Tempered in the purifying fires of adversity, I had been forged into a resilient new alloy, a protective, nurturing force for the preservation of my family and our hard-won serenity. It took another 6 months before I was able to share my full story with victim advocacy groups and law enforcement associations, aiming to pierce the pernicious silence surrounding financial abuse and coercive domestic partnerships. Where others still shrank from confronting these shadowed social cancers, Elise and I strode forward as beacons of survival and empowerment, living testaments to the regenerative capacity of the human spirit. While the generational trauma inflicted upon my little girl can never be fully expunged, I remain resolute that her path will remain unshackled by the oppressive chains of her father's monumental moral failures. Where Declan committed his life to the pursuit of vapid corporeal riches, Elise will only know richness of character and resilience. And each time I gaze out over the dusky rolling hillsides from our little cabin's porch, breathing in the piney embrace of our hard-won freedom, I know we have both discovered the true treasures worth safeguarding: family, refuge, and the invincible fortitude to prevail over even the darkest, most insidious transgressions. "Zara, what the hell is this?" I demanded, holding up the shredded remains of my late mother's quilt. Zara smirked, her green eyes glinting with malice. "Oops, my scissors slipped. Guess you'll have to toss out that ratty old thing now, Camille. It's not like it belonged in this house anyway, just like you." I stood there, my hands shaking with rage as I clutched the tattered fabric. This quilt was the last piece of my mother I had left, a cherished memento of the love and warmth she always provided. And now, thanks to my spiteful teenage sister-in-law, it was ruined. But I shouldn't have been surprised. This was just another day in the Hawthorne household, where I was constantly reminded that I would never truly belong. As I looked around the lavish penthouse with its sleek modern furnishings and breathtaking city views, I felt like an outsider, an intruder in my own home. I had given up everything, my career as a fashion designer, my independence, my identity, to be with Jackson, to be the perfect society wife. But no matter how hard I tried, his family made it clear I would never be good enough. "What's going on in here?" Olivia, my mother-in-law, strutted into the room, her critical gaze sweeping over me. "Camille, I thought I told you to have the laundry finished by noon. Honestly, it's not that hard. What do you even do all day?" I bit my tongue, swallowing the retort that bubbled up, that I spent my days cooking, cleaning, and catering to her every whim, that I poured my heart into being the homemaker she demanded, even as she belittled my every effort. "I was just about to get to it, Olivia," I said evenly, "but then I found this." I held up the destroyed quilt, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "Zara, Oh, that old thing?" Olivia cut me off with a dismissive wave. "It was an eyesore anyway. Zara did you a favor getting rid of it." She turned to her daughter with an approving smile. "Good job, sweetheart. This house has no room for Camille's second-hand rags." Zara preened under the praise, shooting me a triumphant smirk. I opened my mouth to protest, but just then Jackson walked in. "What's with all the commotion?" he asked, loosening his tie. His eyes fell on the quilt in my hands, and he frowned. "Is that your mother's blanket? What happened to it?" "Your sister destroyed it," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "On purpose, and your mother is congratulating her." Jackson sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Cam, I'm sure it was an accident. Don't make a big deal out of it." An accident? Was he serious? I stared at him, searching his face for any hint of the man I fell in love with, the man who promised to always stand by my side. But lately, that man was getting harder and harder to find. "You're taking their side?" I asked incredulously. "Again, Jackson, this quilt was priceless to me. It was all I had left of my mother, and now it's gone." "It's just a blanket, Camille," he said impatiently. "I'll buy you a new one, a nicer one. Just let it go, okay? Let it go." That's what he always said. Every time his family disrespected me, every time they made me feel small and worthless, he told me to let it go, to be the bigger person. But as I stood there, surrounded by the people who were supposed to be my family, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep shrinking myself to fit into their narrow expectations. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness, my very sense of self, for a man who wouldn't even stand up for me. Something inside me snapped, a hidden reserve of strength and resolve I didn't know I had. I dropped the ruined quilt and squared my shoulders, meeting Olivia's icy glare head-on. "No," I said firmly, "I won't let it go. Not this time. I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done playing by your rules. From now on, I'm standing up for myself, with or without your support." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out, my head held high. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was done being a doormat in my own life. It was time to take back control, no matter the cost. The confrontation with Zara and Olivia left me shaking with anger and humiliation. I couldn't believe the cruelty they were capable of, destroying the one thing I cherished most. and Jackson, my supposed partner, had once again failed to stand up for me. I stormed into our bedroom, hot tears stinging my eyes. I yanked open the closet door, grabbing a suitcase and tossing clothes haphazardly inside. I couldn't stay here another minute, not with these vipers who delighted in tearing me down. "What do you think you're doing?" Jackson's voice cut through the room, sharp and accusatory. I whirled around, my heart pounding. "I'm leaving, Jackson. I can't do this anymore. I won't." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "Don't be dramatic, Camille. It was just a stupid quilt." "It was my mother's quilt," I shouted, my voice cracking. "The only piece of her I had left, and your sister destroyed it on purpose, while your mother cheered her on." "They didn't mean anything by it," he said dismissively. "You're overreacting as usual." I stared at him, incredulous. "Overreacting? Are you kidding me? Your family has done nothing but belittle and demean me from the moment I stepped into this house, and you've let them." "What do you want me to do, Camille?" he snapped. "They're my family. I can't just turn my back on them." "But you can turn your back on me," I retorted. "Your wife? The mother of your child?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me. You knew my family could be difficult." "Difficult?" I laughed bitterly. "They're monsters, Jackson, and you're just as bad for enabling them." His face hardened, his eyes turning to ice. "Watch yourself, Camille. Remember, I'm the one who gave you this life. This luxurious penthouse, the clothes on your back, the food on your plate. Without me, you're nothing." His words hit me like a slap. Is that really how he saw me? As some charity case he had deigned to rescue from a life of mediocrity? "Well then, I guess it's a good thing I'm leaving," I said coldly. "I'd rather have nothing than spend another second with you and your toxic family." I zipped up the suitcase, brushing past him, but he grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back," he hissed. "I'll make sure you never see Mia again. I'll bury you in so much legal red tape you'll be destitute and alone. Is that what you want?" Fear seized my heart at the thought of losing my daughter, of being cut off from the one pure, untainted love in my life. But then something caught my eye. Peeking out from under the bed was a scrap of red lace. With a sinking feeling, I reached down and pulled out a skimpy thong, one that definitely didn't belong to me. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, holding up the offending undergarment. For a split second, panic flashed across Jackson's face, but he quickly composed himself, snatching the thong from my hand. "It's nothing," he said smoothly. "Probably just something of Zara's that got mixed up in the laundry." "Bullshit," I spat. "Zara wouldn't be caught dead in La Perla, but you know who would?" I stepped closer, my voice dripping with venom. "Your secretary, Lily." He blanched, confirming my suspicions. The late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls, the designer gifts he claimed were for clients. It all made sense now. "How long?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "How long have you been screwing her behind my back?" "Camille, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off with a harsh laugh. "Save it," I said, grabbing my suitcase. "I'm done. With you, with this sham of a marriage, with this entire fucked-up family. You can have your little mistress. But I'm taking Mia, and I'm taking you for everything you're worth." I strode out of the room, my head held high, even as tears streamed down my face. I had lost my mother's quilt, my dignity, my faith in the man I loved. But I refused to lose myself. This was war, and I was ready to fight like hell. With shaking hands, I rifled through the drawers of Jackson's mahogany desk, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed proof of his infidelity, something tangible to use against him in the divorce proceedings. Beneath a stack of financial reports, I found it. A small, black velvet box. My stomach lurched as I flipped it open, revealing a stunning diamond bracelet. The kind of bracelet you give to a mistress, not a wife. I snapped a photo with my phone, then kept digging. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, email printouts, all painting a sordid picture of Jackson's extramarital activities. He had been lavishing Lily with gifts and clandestine getaways, all while treating me like a burden. Rage bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. How dare he? How dare he betray me, humiliate me, make me feel like I was the problem when he was the one stepping out on our marriage? I thought back to all the times he had critiqued my appearance, making snide comments about my post-baby body, the way he would roll his eyes when I talked about my fashion blog, dismissing it as a silly hobby. He had chipped away at my self-esteem, piece by piece, until I barely recognized myself. But now I saw him for what he truly was. A manipulative, selfish bastard who cared only about his own pleasure and status. Well, I was done being his trophy wife, his arm candy, his doormat. I gathered up the evidence, stuffing it into my purse. Then I marched into the living room where Jackson was pouring himself a scotch, acting like he didn't have a care in the world. "You son of a bitch," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How could you do this to me, to our family?" He looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and boredom. "Do what, Camille? What are you babbling about now?" I threw the credit card statements at his feet, watching as they fluttered to the ground. "I know about Lily. I know you've been cheating on me." For a moment he looked stunned. Then his face twisted into an ugly sneer. "So what if I have? Can you blame me? Look at you, Camille. You let yourself go. You're not the woman I married." His words sliced through me like a knife, but I refused to let him see me crumble. Not anymore. "No, I'm not," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm better, because I'm done letting you treat me like garbage. I'm done being your wife, your punching bag, your fucking servant." I pulled out my phone, showing him the photo of the diamond bracelet. I wonder what the tabloids would make of this. The great Jackson Hawthorne caught showering his secretary with jewels while his wife raises his child. His face paled, his eyes darting to the phone. "Camille, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. I can change, I swear." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "It's too late for that. I've already filed for divorce, and I'm going for full custody of Mia." "You can't do that," he sputtered, his fists clenching. "I won't let you take my daughter from me." "You should have thought of that before you stuck your dick in your secretary," I spat. "I'm done being your doormat, Jackson. I'm taking Mia, and I'm taking half of everything. You can rot in hell with your precious family for all I care." I turned to walk away, but his next words stopped me cold. "You'll never make it on your own," he sneered. "You're nothing without me, Camille. Just a washed-up wannabe designer with a stupid little blog. You need me." I whirled back around, getting right in his face. "Watch me," I hissed. "I'm going to build a life for myself and Mia, a better life than you ever gave us. And when I'm a success, when my designs are walking down runways and gracing magazine covers, I'll make sure the whole world knows the truth about you, about the kind of man you really are." With that, I stormed out of the penthouse, Mia clutched tightly in my arms. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was never looking back. Jackson Hawthorne and his vicious family could burn in the hell they'd made for themselves. I was free, and I was ready to rise from the ashes, stronger than ever. Months had passed since I walked out on Jackson and his toxic family. Mia and I had settled into a small but cozy studio apartment, far from the glittering penthouse that had been our gilded cage. Money was tight, but we were making it work. I poured my heart into my fashion blog, determined to turn it into something more, a career, a future, a way out of the mess my life had become. I was just putting Mia down for a nap when a frantic knocking sounded at the door. Frowning, I tiptoed over and peeked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. Zara. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. The last thing I needed was more drama from the Hawthorns. But something in Zara's expression, a desperate, haunted look I had never seen before, made me unlock the door. "Zara?" I said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" She pushed past me, her eyes wild. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything's fallen apart, Camille. It's all gone to shit." I closed the door, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about? What's happened?" The story spilled out of her in fits and starts, each revelation more shocking than the last. After the divorce, Walter's shady business dealings had come to light. Embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. He had been running a criminal empire right under everyone's noses. The FBI had seized all their assets, leaving the family penniless and disgraced. Jackson, unable to cope with the shame and pressure, had turned to alcohol and gambling. He had blown through what little money they had left, racking up massive debts to some very dangerous people. Olivia, always so poised and put together, had suffered a nervous breakdown and was currently in a psychiatric ward. And Zara? She had been unceremoniously kicked out of her elite private school, her tuition left unpaid. She was broke, homeless, and utterly alone. "I didn't know where else to turn," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've been awful to you, Camille. I know I don't deserve your help, but I have nowhere else to go." I stared at her, conflicting emotions warring inside me. A part of me, the part that still stung from her cruelty, wanted to turn her away, to let her suffer the consequences of her actions. But another part, the part that knew how it felt to be lost and scared, couldn't bear to leave her on the streets. "You can stay here," I said finally, my voice tight, "for a little while, until you figure something out." Her shoulders sagged with relief, fresh tears spilling over. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much, Camille. I swear, I'll make it up to you. I'll be better, I promise." I held up a hand, cutting off her tearful rambling. "Let's get one thing straight, Zara. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Mia. She deserves to have her aunt in her life, even if that aunt is a spoiled brat who made my life hell." Zara flinched at my harsh words but nodded. "I understand, and I'm sorry, Camille, for everything." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know, but sorry doesn't erase the past. If you're going to stay here, there will be rules, boundaries. You will treat me with respect, pull your weight around the apartment, and be a positive influence on Mia. If you can't do that, then there's the door." She nodded vigorously, her eyes wide. "I will, I promise. I'll do whatever you say." "Good," I said, my tone softening slightly. "Then let's get you settled in. It's not much, but it's home." As I showed Zara to the pull-out couch that would be her bed, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns life had taken. A year ago, I had been the one groveling at the Hawthorns' feet, desperate for scraps of their approval. Now they were the ones crawling to me for help. Their world shattered beyond repair. It was a bittersweet victory, one that tasted of ashes and regret. But as I watched Zara curl up on the couch, her face etched with gratitude and exhaustion, I knew I had made the right choice. Not for her, but for me. For the person I wanted to be, the person my mother had raised me to be. Someone who could find compassion, even in the face of cruelty. Someone who could rise above the pain and pettiness and choose to be better. Someone who could finally truly be free. Living with Zara was a test of my patience and resolve. Despite her tearful promises to change, old habits die hard. She was moody, entitled, and prone to lashing out when things didn't go her way. More than once I had to bite my tongue to keep from throwing her out on the street. But I persevered, for Mia's sake. My daughter had lost so much already. Her father, her grandparents, the only home she'd ever known. I couldn't bear to take her aunt away, too, no matter how difficult Zara made things. So I set clear boundaries, laying out the rules of the apartment in no uncertain terms. Zara was to clean up after herself, contribute to the household chores, and watch her language around Mia. If she couldn't follow those simple guidelines, she was welcome to leave. To my surprise, Zara actually made an effort. She tidied the living room without being asked, helped with the dishes, and even entertained Mia while I worked on my blog. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was progress. And my blog, it was finally taking off. My honest, raw posts about my divorce and starting over had struck a chord with readers. My follower count was skyrocketing, and I was getting more sponsored content offers than ever before. But the real game changer came in the form of an email from a major fashion magazine. They had stumbled across my blog and were impressed with my designs. They wanted to feature me in a multi-page spread, showcasing my work to the world. I stared at the email, my heart pounding. This was it. The big break I had been dreaming of. The chance to turn my passion into a real career. With shaking hands, I typed out a reply, accepting their offer. I knew I should be ecstatic, but a part of me was terrified. Putting myself out there, exposing my creations to the judgment of the fashion industry, it was a huge risk. If they hated my work, it could crush my dreams before they even had a chance to take flight. But I couldn't let fear hold me back. Not anymore. I had spent too long playing it safe, shrinking myself to fit into the mold of the perfect wife and mother. It was time to bet on myself, to chase my dreams with everything I had. I threw myself into preparing for the feature, stitching and sketching late into the night. Zara, to her credit, stepped up to help with Mia, keeping her occupied so I could work. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. As the date of the photo shoot approached, I could barely contain my excitement. This was really happening. I was going to be in a magazine, my designs splashed across glossy pages for all the world to see. I was so caught up in my own head, I almost didn't hear the knock at the door. Assuming it was the mailman, I swung it open without checking the peephole. My stomach dropped. There, standing in the dingy hallway of my apartment building, were the last people I ever expected to see. Jackson, Walter, and Olivia. My ex-husband and former in-laws, the people who had made my life a living hell. They looked haggard and worn, their designer clothes rumpled and stained. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and fear. Jackson stepped forward, his bloodshot eyes pleading. "Camille, we need your help. We have nowhere else to go." I wanted to slam the door in their faces, to tell them to go to hell and never come back. But before I could, Walter shouldered his way into the apartment, Olivia and Jackson close behind. "We're moving in," Walter announced, dropping his suitcase on the floor. "You have a spare room, don't you? It'll be just like old times." I stared at them, my mouth hanging open in shock. The audacity, the sheer nerve of these people. To show up at my door, expecting me to take them in after everything they had done. But as I looked at their desperate, defeated faces, I realized something. They had nothing left. No money, no status, no power. They were at rock bottom, just like I had been. And in that moment, I knew I had a choice to make. I could turn them away, leave them to fend for themselves on the streets, or I could be the bigger person, the person my mother had raised me to be. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Fine," I said, my voice hard. "You can stay, but we're doing this on my terms. And if you cross me, even once, you're gone." "Understood?" They nodded, relief etched on their faces. As they shuffled into the apartment, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. The Hawthorns had taken everything from me. My home, my marriage, my self-worth. But now the tables had turned. Now they were the ones at my mercy, and I was going to make damn sure they never forgot it. The Hawthorns settled into my apartment like a plague, infesting every corner with their toxic presence. They critiqued everything from the size of the rooms to the threadbare furnishings, making snide comments about how far I had fallen. I gritted my teeth and bore it, reminding myself that this was temporary. As soon as my feature launched, I would have the means to kick them out and never look back. But living with them was a nightmare. Walter and Olivia commandeered the bedroom, leaving Jackson to sleep on the couch. They treated my home like a hotel, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. Olivia was the worst, constantly finding fault with my parenting and housekeeping. "Really, Camille," she sniffed, eyeing the dishes in the sink. "I thought you would have learned to keep a cleaner house by now. It's no wonder Jackson strayed." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. It took every ounce of willpower not to throw her designer luggage out the window. Jackson, for his part, mostly avoided me. He spent his days sulking around the apartment, drinking my cheap vodka and muttering about his fall from grace. I caught him eyeing Zara a few times, his gaze lingering on her developing curves. It made my skin crawl. But Zara surprised me. She stepped up in ways I never could have imagined, helping with Mia and standing up to Olivia's barbs. "Back off, Mom," she snapped one evening when Olivia started in on my cooking. "Camille's doing the best she can, which is more than I can say for you." Olivia's face turned an ugly shade of purple, but she shut her mouth. I shot Zara a grateful look, mouthing a silent, "Thank you." As the day of my big photo shoot approached, the tension in the apartment reached a boiling point. I was a bundle of nerves, triple-checking my designs and obsessing over every detail. "I don't know why you're bothering with this silly little hobby," Walter sneered, flipping through my sketches. "It's not like you have any real talent. You should be focusing on finding a rich husband to take care of you and Mia." I snatched the sketches back, my hands shaking with rage. "This is not a hobby," I said, my voice low and fierce. "This is my career, my passion, and I will not let you or anyone else diminish that." Walter scoffed, exchanging a knowing look with Olivia. "Career? Please. You're a washed-up housewife with delusions of grandeur. You'll never make it in the fashion world." I opened my mouth to retort, but Mia's cry from the bedroom cut me off. I shot Walter a venomous glare and hurried to comfort my daughter. As I rocked Mia back to sleep, I felt a surge of determination. I would show them. I would show everyone. I was more than just Jackson Hawthorne's ex-wife, more than a mother, more than a failed socialite. I was Camille Rousseau, a designer, a dreamer, a survivor. And I was going to take the fashion world by storm, no matter what it took. The morning of the shoot dawned bright and clear. I kissed Mia goodbye, leaving her in Zara's capable hands. Then I gathered up my designs and headed out the door, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. But when I returned home that evening, flush with the success of the shoot, I found the apartment in chaos. Mia was crying, her little face streaked with tears. Zara was nowhere to be seen. And there, in the middle of the living room, were Walter and Olivia. They were surrounded by the tattered remains of my sketches and fabric samples, their faces twisted with malice. "What have you done?" I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivia smiled, a cruel, vicious thing. "We put an end to this foolish pipe dream of yours. Did you really think we would let you succeed? Let you humiliate us even further?" I stared at the ruins of my work, months of blood, sweat, and tears reduced to scraps. I wanted to scream, to rage, to fall to my knees and weep, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not in front of them. Not in front of Mia. So I did the only thing I could. I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and met their triumphant gazes with a steely one of my own. "Get out!" I said, my voice calm and cold as ice. "Get out of my house and never come back. You have no power over me anymore." And with that, I took my daughter's hand and walked away, leaving the stunned Hawthorns in my wake. They had tried to break me, to crush my dreams and my spirit, but they had underestimated me. I was Camille Rousseau, and I would rise from the ashes of their cruelty, stronger and more determined than ever. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of grim determination. The Hawthorns had destroyed my designs, but they hadn't destroyed me. I would not let their cruelty derail my dreams. I got Mia ready for daycare, kissing her chubby cheeks and promising to be back soon. Then I headed out to meet with the magazine editor, praying that I could salvage something from this mess. But when I arrived at the office, my heart sank. The editor's face was tight with concern, her brow furrowed as she flipped through the tattered remains of my portfolio. "Camille," she said gently, "I'm so sorry, but we can't run the feature like this. The designs are ruined, and we go to print in less than a week. There's just no time to reshoot everything." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This was my big break, my one shot at making it in the fashion world. And now, thanks to the Hawthorns, it was slipping through my fingers. But I refused to give up. "Not now, not ever. Please," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I can fix this. I can recreate the designs, work around the clock to make it happen. Just give me a chance." The editor hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "Okay," she said finally. "You have 48 hours. If you can deliver the designs by then, we'll run the feature. But Camille, this is your last chance. Don't let me down." I nodded, my throat tight with gratitude and determination. "I won't, I promise." I raced home, my mind already whirling with ideas. I would have to work non-stop, forgoing sleep and meals to make this happen, but I would do it. I had to. When I burst through the door of my apartment, however, I stopped short. The place was trashed, even worse than before. Furniture overturned, dishes smashed, clothes strewn everywhere. And there, in the middle of the chaos, was Zara. She was huddled on the floor, her knees drawn up to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Zara?" I said softly, kneeling down beside her. "What happened? Where's Mia?" She looked up at me, her eyes haunted. "They took her," she whispered. "Mom and Dad, they came back after you left, demanding to see her. I tried to stop them, but they pushed past me. They said they were taking her away, that you were an unfit mother, that she belonged with them." My blood ran cold. They had taken my daughter. My sweet, innocent Mia, the one pure light in my life. I grabbed Zara by the shoulders, my fingers digging into her skin. "Where did they go? Tell me, Zara. Where did they take her?" She shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. "I don't know. They wouldn't say. But Camille, there's something else." She took a shuddering breath, her next words hitting me like a sledgehammer. "Jackson was with them. He helped them take her." I staggered back, my vision blurring. Jackson. My ex-husband, the father of my child. He had betrayed me in the deepest way possible, siding with his vicious family over his own daughter. But I didn't have time to process the pain, the anger, the sickening sense of betrayal. I had to find Mia. I had to get her back. I turned to Zara, my voice hard as steel. Pack a bag. We're going to find them, and we're going to bring Mia home. And then... I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms. Then we're going to make them pay for what they've done. Zara nodded, a flicker of her old fire returning to her eyes. I'm with you, Camille. No matter what it takes. We set out into the night, two women on a mission. I didn't know where the Hawthorns had gone or how we would find them, but I did know one thing. They had messed with the wrong mother, the wrong woman, and they were about to learn just how far I would go to protect what was mine. This wasn't just about my career anymore, or my pride, or even my revenge. This was about my daughter, my family, and heaven help anyone who stood in my way. It had been 5 years since that fateful night. 5 years since I had rescued Mia from the clutches of the Hawthorns and walked away from their toxic influence for good. In that time, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. My feature in the magazine had been a resounding success, launching my career as a sought-after designer. I had moved Mia and myself into a beautiful townhouse, far from the painful memories of our past. We were happy, healthy, and thriving. But I never forgot what the Hawthorns had done, the scars they had left on my soul. And as I watched their lives unravel from afar, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. Walter and Olivia, once the king and queen of high society, were now divorced and destitute. Walter had been arrested for his financial crimes, his reputation in tatters. Olivia, unable to cope with the shame and scandal, had fled to Europe, where she lived a lonely, bitter existence. Jackson, my charming ex-husband, had drowned in his own vices. His gambling debts had caught up with him, forcing him to sell off every last possession. Last I heard, he was living in a seedy motel room, drowning his sorrows in cheap whiskey. And then there was Zara, my former tormentor, the girl who had made my life a living hell. She had shown up at my door a few months ago, looking thin and haggard, her eyes haunted by the ghosts of her past. "Camille," she had whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am for everything." I had stared at her, this broken shell of a girl, and felt a flicker of pity. "I forgave you a long time ago, Zara," I said softly. "Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger, that resentment, it was poisoning me from the inside out." She had nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't deserve your kindness, Camille, not after what I did. But I want you to know that I'm going to be better. I'm going to make something of myself, just like you did." I had smiled then, a genuine smile. "I know you will, Zara. You're a Hawthorn, after all, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're survivors." She had left then, her head held high, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. And as I watched her go, I realized that I had finally found the peace I had been searching for all these years. Not through revenge or spite or bitterness, but through forgiveness, through letting go of the past and embracing the future. I looked around my beautiful home, at the photos of Mia and I smiling and laughing, at the racks of clothing bearing my own label. I had built this life for myself, brick by brick, stitch by stitch, and I was proud of it. I thought back to that scared, broken woman I had been all those years ago, the one who had cowered in the shadow of the Hawthorns' cruelty. I barely recognized her now because I was no longer that woman. I was Camille Rousseau, fashion designer, mother, survivor, and I had risen from the ashes of my past like a phoenix, stronger and more radiant than ever before. As I sat down at my desk to sketch out my latest collection, I felt a sense of deep contentment wash over me. I had faced the demons of my past and emerged victorious. I had found my purpose, my passion, my true self, and nothing, not the Hawthorns, not the challenges of single motherhood, not the cutthroat world of fashion, could take that away from me. I was free. I was whole. I was finally truly happy. And as I lost myself in the flow of creation, the fabrics and colors swirling beneath my fingertips, I knew that this was just the beginning of my new life, my new story. A story of resilience, of redemption, of love, a story that was all my own. I should have known something was off the moment I stepped through the front door. The living room was in disarray, couch cushions tossed carelessly aside, and the contents of the bookshelf strewn across the floor. A cold dread washed over me as I rushed upstairs to my bedroom. The sight that greeted me made my heart sink. Drawers hung open, clothes spilling out haphazardly. My jewelry box lay overturned on the dresser, its contents scattered like a kaleidoscope of broken dreams. "Paul!" I shouted, my voice trembling with panic. "Get up here now!" Moments later, my husband appeared in the doorway, his expression unnervingly calm. "What's going on?" I gestured wildly at the chaos surrounding us. "What does it look like? We've been robbed." Paul surveyed the scene with an infuriatingly casual demeanor. "Are you sure? Maybe you just misplaced some things." Anger flared within me as I knelt beside the jumbled mess of jewelry. My fingers frantically sifted through the tangle of chains and pendants, but the one item I desperately sought remained elusive. "It's gone," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. My grandmother's necklace is gone. The vintage diamond piece had been a cherished heirloom passed down through generations. More than mere jewels, it embodied the love and resilience of the remarkable woman who had raised me. Paul's voice cut through my anguish. "I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Don't worry, we'll find it." I whirled on him, disbelief and anger contorting my features. "How can you be so calm about this? That necklace is priceless to me." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Kristen, getting upset won't solve anything. Let's just retrace our steps and look for it calmly." But I knew, deep down, that the necklace wasn't simply misplaced. Someone had taken it, stolen a piece of my family's legacy right from under our noses. And as the sickening realization set in, a single name echoed through my mind, one I desperately hoped wasn't behind this violation. Janice. That necklace meant everything to me. More than just diamonds and gold, it was a connection to the woman who had been more of a mother to me than my own. After my parents died in that terrible car accident when I was 8 years old, it was Grandma Rose who took me in and gave me a real home. While other kids my age were playing make-believe, I was learning how to cook, clean, and fend for myself. Grandma never coddled me, but she loved me fiercely in her own way. "Life ain't always pretty, baby girl," she'd say in her thick southern drawl. "But if you got grit and grace, you can make it through any storm." Those words became my mantra, a lifeline I clung to during the darkest days. Because even when the bills piled up and the fridge ran empty, Grandma Rose never lost her unshakable spirit. She worked tirelessly as a seamstress, her calloused fingers deftly guiding the needle and thread. I can still picture her hunched over that old Singer sewing machine, the whirring rhythmic as she brought fabric to life. It was during those long nights, as I drifted off to the comforting hum of the machine, that Grandma would tell me about the necklace. "This here's been in our family for generations," she'd say, her weathered hands cradling the glittering gems. "Passed down from mother to daughter as a reminder of our strength and resilience." To Grandma, those diamonds represented more than just wealth. They were a testament to the sacrifices and perseverance of the women who came before us. With each delicate link in the chain, she wove the tales of our ancestors' triumphs and struggles, binding me to a legacy of unbreakable spirit. "One day this'll be yours, baby girl," Grandma would whisper, "a piece of our history to carry with you always." Those words echoed through my mind as I knelt amid the wreckage of my bedroom, the vacant space where the necklace once rested mocking me. Grandma had trusted me to safeguard our family's heirloom, and I had failed her. "We have to call the police," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of grief and determination. Paul shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. "Let's not jump to conclusions, Kristen. For all we know, you just misplaced it somewhere." I fixed him with a steely glare, my hands balling into fists at my sides. How could he be so blasé about this? Didn't he understand the profound significance of what had been taken? "You think I'd just carelessly lose something that important?" I snapped. "No, Paul. Someone took it. Someone who knew exactly what that necklace meant to me." As the terrible realization settled over me, a singular name burned like acid on my tongue. The one person I knew was capable of such a heartless act, the one who had always resented my bond with Grandma Rose. Janice. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that Janice's love comes with a steep price, and I was never willing to pay it. From the moment Paul and I started dating, his mother made it abundantly clear that I would never be good enough in her eyes. A girl with no family and no money? She'd sneer, her thin lips curling into a disdainful sneer. Is that really the best you can do, Paul? Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. I had survived far worse than a disapproving mother-in-law, even one as venomous as Janice. Unfortunately, Paul was never able to break free from her toxic grip. Despite my pleading, he remained her obedient little boy, jumping at her every whim and demand. She's just looking out for me, he'd insist, his eyes downcast with shame. You know how worried she gets. I knew better than to argue. Janice had him wrapped around her bony finger, and any attempt to sever that twisted bond would only push him further into her clutches. So I suffered in silence, enduring her endless criticisms and backhanded insults. I was too messy, too loud, too opinionated, a constant disappointment in her eyes. But it was the underhanded digs at my humble upbringing that cut deepest of all. I still can't believe Paul married a girl raised by some old seamstress, she'd sneer, her gaze boring into me with undisguised disdain. He deserves so much better than that. It took every ounce of willpower not to slap that smug expression right off her face. How dare she disrespect the woman who had sacrificed everything to give me a chance at life? Grandma Rose was worth 1,000 of Janice, a true pillar of strength and grace in the face of adversity. While Janice wallowed in her wealth and privilege, Grandma had clawed her way out of poverty with nothing but her calloused hands and an indomitable spirit. The necklace had been her final gift to me, a symbolic passing of the torch from one strong woman to another. And now, thanks to Janice's greed and pettiness, that precious heirloom was gone forever. I could feel the anger simmering within me, a white-hot rage that threatened to boil over. Paul might have been content to let his mother trample all over our lives, but I refused to be her doormat any longer. We're calling the police, I stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. And if you won't stand up to your mother, then I'll handle this myself. Paul's eyes widened in alarm, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Kristen, you can't be serious. It's just a necklace, for God's sake. Just a necklace. How could he be so callous, so dismissive of something that meant the world to me? It's more than just a necklace, Paul, I said, my voice low and trembling with barely restrained fury. It's my heritage, my connection to the woman who made me who I am today. And if you can't see that, if you're willing to let your mother stomp all over that, then maybe we have bigger problems than a missing piece of jewelry. As the words left my lips, I realized they carried a weight far beyond this single act of betrayal. This was about taking a stand, about refusing to let Janice's toxicity poison our lives any longer. If Paul wouldn't fight for me, for us, then I would have to fight for myself. I should have known better than to hope for a moment's peace. Not when Janice was involved. The woman had a sixth sense for sniffing out drama, and my confrontation with Paul must have set off her internal chaos detector. Less than 24 hours after our heated argument, the doorbell rang with that all-too-familiar cadence. 3 sharp trills like a queen announcing her arrival. I'll get it, Paul called out, his voice laced with a mixture of resignation and dread. But I was already making my way to the front door, steeling myself for the inevitable storm that was about to blow through our home. Sure enough, when I pulled it open, there she stood, Janice in all her designer-clad glory. Well, aren't you going to invite me in? She demanded, brushing past me without waiting for a response. I bit back the acidic retort that danced on the tip of my tongue. Engaging with Janice was like fanning the flames of a wildfire. The more oxygen you gave her, the more she burned. To what do we owe the pleasure? I asked instead, my voice taut with forced politeness. Janice made a show of looking around the living room, her nose wrinkling in distaste. Good Lord, Kristen, this place is a sty. Haven't you heard of dusting? I opened my mouth to respond, but Paul cut me off with a nervous chuckle. Now, Mother, you know Kristen works hard to keep everything tidy. Clearly not hard enough, Janice sniffed, casting a disdainful glance in my direction. The urge to throttle her was becoming overwhelming, but I managed a tight smile. I'll get us some coffee. As I retreated to the kitchen, I could hear Janice's shrill voice carrying through the house. Honestly, Paul, I don't know how you put up with her. You could do so much better, you know. My hands trembled with barely restrained rage as I fumbled with the coffee mugs. How dare she speak about me like that, as if I were some sort of burden to be endured? By the time I returned to the living room, Janice had made herself quite at home, her bony frame perched on the edge of the sofa like a vulture surveying its prey. Paul sat in the armchair across from her, his shoulders hunched and his gaze averted. "There you are," Janice said, fixing me with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "I was just telling Paul how lovely it would be if we could have a proper family dinner this weekend. You know, a chance for us to catch up and spend some quality time together." The words oozed from her mouth like poisoned honey, and I felt my stomach churn with dread. A family dinner with Janice was akin to a medieval torture session. 2 hours of endless needling and criticism, all while forcing hollow smiles. "That sounds lovely," I lied through gritted teeth, setting the coffee tray down with more force than intended. Janice's gaze drifted to the disarray of my jewelry box, still scattered across the dresser top. "Good heavens, Kristen, what happened here? It looks like a tornado blew through." A familiar prickle of unease crept up my spine as her beady eyes raked over the jumbled mess of chains and pendants. Surely she couldn't know, could she? "Actually, we think we were robbed yesterday," Paul piped up, shooting me a nervous glance. "Some things went missing, including that tacky old necklace of Kristen's," Janice interjected with a dismissive wave of her hand. "The one from her grandmother, right?" The casual way she spoke of the necklace, as if it were little more than a worthless bauble, sent a spike of white-hot fury through my veins. "You know about the missing necklace?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Janice met my gaze with an infuriatingly bland expression. "Of course, dear. Paul mentioned it when I arrived." But her eyes, those soulless pits, betrayed something else entirely. A flicker of smugness, of twisted satisfaction at my pain. In that moment, I knew the truth with every fiber of my being. The necklace hadn't been taken by some random thief. It had been stolen by the very woman sitting before me, the one who had always resented and envied my bond with Grandma Rose. "You." The word caught in my throat, rage and disbelief rendering me momentarily speechless. Janice merely arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow, her thin lips curving into a serpentine smile. "Me?" she purred, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Why, Kristen? Whatever do you mean?" The silence that followed Janice's thinly veiled taunt was deafening, a vacuum of tension that threatened to swallow us whole. I could feel Paul's worried gaze boring into me, silently pleading for me to let it go, to keep the peace. But how could I? How could I possibly sit idly by while this vile woman not only stole from me, but mocked me to my face? "You know exactly what I mean," I growled, my fingers curling into white-knuckled fists at my sides. "That necklace was priceless to me, and you took it out of pure spite." Janice's eyes widened in a parody of innocence, her perfectly manicured hand fluttering to her chest. "Why, Kristen, I'm absolutely appalled that you would accuse me of such a thing. I may have my faults, but theft? Really, dear, you're being quite dramatic." The sickly sweet condescension in her tone was like acid on an open wound. I wanted nothing more than to wipe that smug, self-satisfied smirk off her face once and for all. "Don't play dumb with me, Janice," I spat, taking a step closer to her perch on the sofa. "We both know you've had it out for me from the start. That necklace was my connection to Grandma Rose, and you couldn't stand the fact that she loved me more than you." A flicker of something dark and ugly passed over Janice's features, her carefully cultivated mask of gentility slipping for the briefest of moments. Ah, there it was, the jealousy and resentment that had festered like an open wound for all these years. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a low venomous rasp. "That old crone may have doted on you, but she was nothing more than a common seamstress, certainly not the kind of influence a young woman of means should have in her life." "Mother, please." Paul's timid voice cut through the tension, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was the white-hot rage coursing through my veins, the urge to lash out and make Janice pay for her cruelty. How dare she speak of Grandma Rose with such disrespect? The woman who had sacrificed everything to give me a chance at life, who had instilled in me the values of strength and resilience that her own daughter so sorely lacked. "You're wrong," I said, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "Grandma Rose was worth 1,000 of you. She may not have had money or status, but she had integrity and heart. Two things you'll never understand, you miserable, spiteful hag. The words tumbled from my lips in a torrent of pent-up rage, each one a dagger aimed at the heart of Janice's fragile ego. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of something akin to hurt flash across her features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that infuriatingly smug sneer. Well, well, she clucked, shaking her head in mock disappointment. Such language from the woman who claims to have been raised with manners and grace, although I suppose we can't expect much from someone of your background. The thinly veiled dig at my humble upbringing was the final straw. I opened my mouth to unleash a fresh volley of vitriol, but Paul's voice cut through the haze of fury like a bucket of ice water. "Enough," he shouted, surging to his feet and planting himself between Janice and me. "I won't have the two of you going at each other like this, not in my own home." I recoiled as if he had struck me, stunned by the rare display of backbone from my typically docile husband. For once, the mask of the obedient son had slipped, revealing a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. Strong, decisive, and unwilling to be cowed by his mother's manipulations. But as quickly as that spark of defiance had ignited, it faded, extinguished by the weight of years of conditioning and emotional subjugation. "Mother's right," he said, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "This has gone too far. The necklace is just a material possession, and accusing her of stealing it is unacceptable." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my tongue as I watched him turn to face Janice, his expression a mask of shame and contrition. "I'm so sorry you had to endure such disrespect, Mother," he murmured, his voice thick with remorse. "It won't happen again, I promise." As he wrapped his arm around her bony shoulders in a gesture of misguided filial devotion, I felt something inside me shatter. In that moment, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity that Paul would never truly be on my side, not when it came to his mother. No matter how much she belittled me, no matter how far she took her cruelty, he would always choose her in the end. And as I watched them embrace, united in their twisted, toxic bond, I knew that if I wanted justice for what Janice had done, I would have to take matters into my own hands. The drive up to the lake house should have been a peaceful respite, a chance to escape the suffocating tension that had engulfed our home. But as Paul and I navigated the winding roads in silence, the weight of unspoken accusations hung heavy in the air between us. It had been 3 days since my explosive confrontation with Janice, 3 days of simmering resentment and bitter silence. Paul had made it abundantly clear where his loyalties lay, choosing to bury his head in the sand rather than acknowledge his mother's despicable actions. As for me, I was done playing the role of the dutiful, long-suffering wife. Grandma Rose hadn't raised me to be a doormat, and I refused to let Janice trample all over her legacy any longer. The proof I needed had arrived in the form of a nondescript envelope, slipped unceremoniously through the mail slot 2 days ago. Inside was a single piece of paper, a pawn shop receipt detailing the sale of a vintage diamond necklace, the very one that had been stolen from my home. I had pored over the document obsessively, my fingers tracing the damning evidence of Janice's betrayal. The date, the description, even the listed seller's name. It all added up to an undeniable truth that Paul refused to accept. His mother was a thief, a vindictive snake, who would stop at nothing to hurt me, to sever my connection to the woman she had always envied and resented. But this time, I wouldn't let her win. This time I would make her pay. The plan had been forming in my mind for days, a slow burn of righteous fury and calculated revenge. And as we pulled up to the secluded lake house, the final pieces clicked into place. "Isn't this nice?" Paul ventured, his voice tentative as he killed the engine. A whole weekend away, just the two of us. I forced a tight smile, willing my features into a mask of forced calm. "Yes, it'll be wonderful to get away from everything." His brow furrowed slightly at my pointed emphasis, but he didn't press the issue. Typical Paul, always eager to avoid confrontation, even when it was long overdue. We unpacked in silence, the tension between us a living, breathing thing. As the sun began to dip below the tree line, I made my move. "I'm going to take a walk down by the water," I announced, already heading for the door. "Clear my head a bit." Paul hesitated, his mouth opening as if to protest, but I was already gone. the screen door slamming shut behind me. The pawn shop was a hole-in-the-wall establishment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that dealt in discretion as much as merchandise. Perfect for someone like Janice, who valued her reputation above all else. The bell above the door jangled as I stepped inside, and a wiry man with beady eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he drawled, his gaze raking over me with poorly veiled suspicion. I steeled my nerves and met his stare head-on, reaching into my pocket for the crumpled receipt. "I'm looking for a necklace that was sold here recently," I said, sliding the paper across the glass countertop. "A vintage diamond piece, according to this receipt." The man's eyes narrowed as he scanned the document, his lips pressing into a thin line. For a moment I feared he would refuse to cooperate, that my carefully laid plans would unravel before they could even begin. But then, slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, I remember this one," he grunted, disappearing into the back room. My heart thundered in my chest as I waited, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally he reappeared, a velvet pouch clutched in his gnarled hand. "Here it is," he said gruffly, upending the pouch onto the counter. There it was, Grandma Rose's necklace, the delicate chains and glittering diamonds that had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. A piece of my heritage, my connection to the woman who had made me who I was. And it had taken everything in me not to snatch it up right then and there, to clutch it to my chest and never let it go again. But I couldn't, not yet. Not until I had made Janice pay for what she had done. "I'll take it," I said, my voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions swirling within me. The pawnbroker eyed me warily, no doubt sensing the barely contained fury simmering beneath my calm exterior. "You sure about that, lady?" he asked, his gaze flickering to the receipt once more. "'Cause according to this, that necklace don't belong to you." I leaned forward, holding his gaze with every ounce of steely determination I possessed. "It belongs to me," I said, each word dripping with conviction. "And I'll do whatever it takes to get it back." The drive back to the lake house was a blur, my mind whirling with the weight of what I had just done. The necklace burned a hole in my pocket, a constant reminder of the line I was about to cross, and just how far I was willing to go to make Janice pay. Paul was already asleep when I slipped back inside, his soft snores drifting from the bedroom. Good, the fewer questions the better. I needed him as far removed from this as possible, both for his own sake and mine. With trembling hands, I retrieved the velvet pouch from my jacket and carefully upended it onto the kitchen counter. There it was, the diamonds winking at me in the dim light, a silent taunt, daring me to go through with my plan. I traced the delicate links with the pad of my finger, steeling my resolve. This was about more than just a piece of jewelry. It was about righting a wrong, about standing up to the toxic force that had plagued my life for far too long. Janice had started this game, and now it was time for me to finish it, on my terms. The rest of the night passed in a flurry of activity, each meticulous step etched into my memory with razor-sharp clarity. The supplies gathered, the plan set in motion, every contingency accounted for. By the time the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, I was ready. The drive into town was a silent one, the radio purposefully muted as I navigated the deserted streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, my heart thundering in my ears like a caged animal desperate to be set free. Finally, I pulled up to the familiar suburban house, its manicured lawn and pristine exterior a carefully cultivated facade, just like the woman who dwelled within. I killed the engine and sat in silence for a long moment, watching as the curtains in the upstairs window twitched ever so slightly. She was awake, no doubt already planning her next round of manipulations and petty cruelties. Well, not today. With a deep, steadying breath, I slipped from the car and made my way up the immaculate path to the front door. The necklace was a reassuring weight in my pocket, a talisman of sorts, a reminder of why I was here, of the justice I sought. The doorbell echoed through the cavernous foyer like a death knell, and I could practically feel Janice's confusion and disdain radiating from the other side of the door. "Who in the world?" Her shrill voice carried, growing closer with each clipped footfall. The moment stretched into an eternity as the lock clicked and the door swung open, revealing Janice in all her silk-robed glory. Her perfectly coiffed hair was mussed, her face devoid of makeup, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that would soon be shattered. "Kristen," she sneered, her brow furrowing in distaste. "What on earth are you doing here at this hour? And without Paul, no less?" I said nothing, merely reached into my pocket and withdrew the necklace, letting the delicate chains pool in my upturned palm. Janice's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. For a fleeting moment, I saw the mask slip, revealing the petty, grasping creature that lurked beneath. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, her gaze darting furtively left and right, as if afraid someone might overhear. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face as I drank in her discomfort, her sudden loss of control. "From the pawn shop," I said, my voice low and laced with triumph. "The same one you sold it to after you stole it from my home." Janice recoiled as if I had struck her, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her mouth in a parody of shock. "I did no such thing," she sputtered, her eyes wide and wild. "How dare you accuse me?" "Save it, Janice," I cut her off, taking a step closer. "I have proof. The receipt, the dates, it all lines up. You took the one thing that meant everything to me out of pure spite and jealousy." For a moment, she seemed to waver, her bravado cracking under the weight of my accusations. But then, like a switch being flipped, that familiar mask of haughty disdain slammed back into place. "Well, well," she sneered, tossing her head with a derisive sniff. "It seems someone has developed quite the flair for the dramatic. Tell me, Kristen, did your darling grandmother teach you those theatrics? Or did you simply inherit her penchant for making a spectacle of yourself?" The barb hit its mark, a white-hot flare of rage licking at my insides. How dare she drag Grandma Rose into this, using her memory as a weapon against me? But I refused to take the bait, to let her goad me into an emotional outburst that would only feed her twisted sense of superiority. Instead, I simply smiled, a slow, predatory curl of the lips that made Janice's eyes narrow with sudden uncertainty. "You're right, Janice," I purred, taking another deliberate step forward. "I did inherit something from my grandmother." I was close enough now to see the flicker of unease in her gaze, the slightest chink in her armor of smug self-assurance. "Her strength," I continued, my voice a low, dangerous rasp. "Her resilience. Her refusal to let petty, vindictive people like you grind her down." Janice opened her mouth, no doubt, to deliver a scathing retort, but I didn't give her the chance. In one fluid motion, I reached out and grabbed a fistful of her silk robe, yanking her forward with a strength that belied my slight frame. "So you can keep your money, your status, your pathetic delusions of grandeur," I hissed, our faces mere inches apart. "Because at the end of the day, I have something far more valuable, the knowledge that I am a better woman than you could ever hope to be." With that, I released her, letting her stagger back in a flurry of ruffled silk and indignant sputtering. But I was already turning away, the necklace clutched in my hand like a victor's spoils. As I strode back down the path toward my car, Janice's outraged shrieks followed me like a bitter requiem. "You'll regret this, Kristen. Do you hear me? You haven't seen the last of me." But her threats fell on deaf ears. Because in that moment, as the morning sun crested over the rooftops and bathed me in its warm glow, I knew that I had already won. Janice might have money and status, but I had something far more precious. The strength of my convictions, the knowledge that I had stood up for what was right. And as the necklace glittered in the light, a piece of my heritage restored, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The calm that comes with knowing you have honored the legacy of those who came before. Grandma Rose would have been proud. The aftermath of my confrontation with Janice was like a whirlwind, a maelstrom of emotions and consequences that threatened to sweep me away. As I pulled up to the lake house, necklace clutched tightly in my trembling hand, a part of me half expected Paul to be waiting on the porch, suitcase in hand, and recriminations on his lips. But when I stepped through the door, the living room was empty, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he had decided to take my side for once. That illusion was swiftly shattered by the sound of his voice drifting in from the kitchen. "Absolutely unacceptable, Mother. I don't care what she said or did. That kind of behavior is inexcusable." My heart sank as I rounded the corner to find him pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. Of course he was talking to Janice, no doubt being regaled with her twisted version of events. Paul's eyes went wide when he saw me, his mouth snapping shut with an audible click. "I have to go," he muttered into the receiver, never taking his gaze off me. "We'll discuss this later." The heavy silence that followed was suffocating, a palpable weight that threatened to crush us both. I could see the questions swirling in Paul's eyes, the desperate need for an explanation warring with his deeply ingrained instinct to avoid confrontation. Finally, he spoke. What happened? Such a simple question, and yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. I could have lied, could have downplayed the events of the morning and tried to smooth things over, but I was done with lies, done with tiptoeing around Janice's fragile ego and toxic manipulations. "I got the necklace back," I said simply, holding it up for him to see, "from the pawn shop where your mother sold it after she stole it from our home." Paul's brow furrowed, his mouth working soundlessly for a moment as he processed my words. That's not possible," he finally managed, shaking his head vehemently. "Mother would never do something like that. She's not a thief, Kristen." The blind devotion in his voice, the utter refusal to even entertain the possibility that his precious mother could be anything less than perfect, was like a physical blow. "Open your eyes, Paul," I exploded, unable to contain my frustration any longer. "I have proof, the receipt, the dates, everything. She took that necklace out of pure spite because she knew how much it meant to me." "No," Paul whispered, his face ashen. "No, you're wrong. You have to be." In that moment, I realized that no amount of evidence would ever be enough to sway him. Janice had him so thoroughly brainwashed, so twisted up in her web of lies and manipulation, that he would always take her side, no matter how despicable her actions. And as that painful truth sank in, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Because for the first time I saw Paul for what he truly was, a weak, spineless man so crippled by his mother's toxicity that he would never be able to fully commit to me, to our marriage. "You know what?" I said, my voice low and laced with resignation. "Believe what you want, Paul, but I'm done walking on eggshells around your mother. I'm done letting her treat me like garbage and disrespect everything I hold dear." I took a step closer, holding his gaze with every ounce of steely determination I possessed. "This necklace represents more than just diamonds and gold. It's a symbol of the strength and resilience that Grandma Rose instilled in me. The same strength that let me stand up to your mother and take back what was rightfully mine." Paul opened his mouth, no doubt to protest or make excuses, but I didn't give him the chance. "So you can keep making apologies for her, keep turning a blind eye to her cruelty and pettiness, but I refuse to be a part of that toxic cycle any longer. Not when it means sacrificing my self-respect and the legacy my grandmother fought so hard to give me." The words hung heavy in the air, a gauntlet thrown down between us. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of my ultimatum stretching out in the silence. Finally, Paul's shoulders slumped in defeat, and I saw the flicker of the man I had once loved extinguish in his eyes. "If that's how you really feel," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing, merely turned and headed for the door, the necklace clutched tightly in my fist. As I stepped out onto the porch, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. Paul was still standing in the kitchen, his back to me and his head bowed in resignation. A part of me ached to go to him, to find a way to make things right, but I knew deep down that it was too late for that. The ties that bound him to his mother were too strong, too deeply ingrained to ever be severed. So I did the only thing I could. I kept walking, letting the screen door slam shut behind me with a finality that reverberated in my soul. As I made my way to the car, the morning sun glinting off the diamonds in my hand, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace amidst the turmoil. Because for the first time in my life, I was truly free, free from Janice's toxic grip, free from the burden of trying to please a woman who would never be satisfied. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure, but as I clutched the necklace to my chest, I knew that Grandma Rose would have understood. She, too, had walked away from situations that threatened to diminish her spirit, her sense of self-worth. And in that moment, as I turned to face an uncertain future, I knew that her strength, her resilience, flowed through my veins like a wellspring of courage and determination. Whatever came next, I would face it head-on, unbowed and unbroken. Because that was the legacy she had passed down to me. A legacy far more precious than any diamond or jewel. A legacy of grace under fire, of dignity in the face of adversity. And for the first time in far too long, I felt truly worthy of carrying that mantle.